Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Battlefield Hardline Veteran Difficulty video walkthrough. This is the very beginning of the game. It is known as the Prologue, and it's an introduction to the walkthrough that I'm making here. And you've probably noticed by the footage in the background that I am trimming out almost everything that does not need to be here into a rather interesting and abridged journey through the game and its narrative. So, this is a very strange battlefield, and it's going to take some discussing and some explaining, and I'm not going to attempt to do it at the very beginning here because there's no need to. So instead, I'm just going to say that this will be a full game walkthrough on Veteran. I'm going to be doing a kind of supercop attempt to try to dish out as much law and justice as I can so that the SVU crowd would be proud of me. I'm going to Marisha Hargitay the shit out of this. Or Marisa, is it? And go from there. And there's an interesting mix of gameplay and genres going on in this game, so it's going to give me an opportunity to talk about all the different things. I'm playing it on PC, there's a whole host of stuff to talk about on that front, and it's just kind of an interim project as we move into the new year. Because it is New Year's coming up, and we're going to be moving forward into 22, hopefully into a much stronger and better and more fortuitous year. And I'm looking forward to sharing it with you guys if you're here watching or listening. And if anybody is interested in being featured in these videos, it is one of the perks of being a Patreon of mine. And there's going to be an interesting showcase coming up here of those kind people that help me out. That said, it's also a cautionary tale not to motion track and rotoscope manually. Please use After Effects, guys. It will save your life and ease you a lot of frustration. So, Battlefield Hardline Veteran Walkthrough. First question you're probably wondering, Chris, is why is this on Veteran? And why cover this now, kind of deal, which is usually a question I get. Back in 2015 or 2016 or something like that, I think it was 2017 actually, I made a balls deep of this game where I went around going, "I'm a cop, you idiot!" and pretending to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. And you can go and watch that if you're interested. It's on my channel, it's a balls deep. When this game first came out, I heard rumours that it was really, really easy, and at the time, I was getting a bit more picky and choosy with walkthroughs, and I wasn't the biggest Battlefield fan, so I ended up skirting this in favour of, I believe it was Black Ops 3, and if you remember Black Ops 3 on realistic difficulty, it was a one-hit kill, it was really difficult, so it was a much, much better guide and much more necessary project to make. So I kind of ignored this game, and then, you know, this game killed Visceral, which was another thing that was a bit frustrating. And then later on, when I did cover it, I did it in a balls deep format, and I never imagined that I would come back to it because it was one of those things where I discovered at that time there were issues with the game that I didn't realise, and I didn't really want to go near it. So I ended up skirting it. I wanted to do other things. It didn't seem like a good idea. And now we move forward to 2021, and gaming is in such a state that some of the bad ideas 5 years ago are kind of really enjoyable and a nice break from disappointment. And it leads us to Battlefield Hardline. And this early sequence here, all the way up to the school until I transition from using the Beretta 92FS into using the Glock, is going to be played on Hardline difficulty. I had to come back and record the start again. So all the footage that you're watching here, the sequence we just did, all of this is on Hardline, which is the hardest difficulty that you unlock once you beat Veteran. And there is a difference in those difficulties. You do notice that the AI is a little bit smarter, but it's still pretty dumb in the grand scheme of things. If you watch the Balls Deep, you'll find out that one of the reasons I didn't make the project then is because the game is really easy. And it really is, because you are so powerful. And you're powerful because in this game you can stealth almost every sequence. And you can arrest people, which is this incredibly powerful mechanic that we're going to be explaining in this video. So it alleviates a lot of the difficulty and a lot of the challenge. The hardest part of this game on this recording run was overcoming glitches that wouldn't let me progress, and a single vehicle segment where you can get killed really early on as you start it, and there's nothing you can do about it because you're just driving a car, you can't hide. And that was it. Everything else was absolutely fine. And it kind of pisses me off that you can't start on Hardline and you have to unlock it, because I would have done the hardest difficulty immediately. But I didn't realise at the time that this wasn't it, because I'd forgotten, you see. And the grave sins of this game are twofold. The first one is, it loads. Oh my god, it loads. I have a particularly spicy version of Hardline, and it can take up to 2.5 minutes to load, which is completely brutal and unbearable. Luckily, when you lose in a mission, it doesn't load that long, it's very quick. But I wasn't losing or loading that much in the missions because it's very straightforward. It's the mid-level stuff, the level-to-level loading. It's like you're generating an entire Battle Royale map, so it takes forever. So replaying through the game has these colossal loads that are really, really, really frustrating. And none of the cutscenes are skippable. And I never even considered unskippable cutscenes to be such a barrier from making a walkthrough in my history of YouTube, because it's been so long since I've played a game that had them. But this game is completely hard-coded with them. You can't do anything about it. There's no mods, there's nothing. If this game got a mod that lets you skip cutscenes, I'd make a Hardline walkthrough to replace this one in a second. And it wouldn't replace this one because this is quite a special project, this, with the way I've edited it, and I hope you enjoy it. What I'd just do is, I'd go either full violence, no arresting, or full stealth, no arresting. I'd just do those two things, and I'd do the whole game on that. And I will do that if that turns up, but I just don't see it happening because of the way the game's programmed. And the checkpoints in this game are kinda shit, but in a good way for when it comes to editing. So if I play things like Uncharted or Halo, if you watch my Halo walkthrough, you might have heard me say things like, it checkpoints so much it makes it difficult to sync the footage up. You'll never have that issue with this game, guys, because this sequence right now, all these enemies that I'm arresting, all these mechanics that I'm not talking about but I will do, if I fuck up, I go back to the very beginning of this. The absolute beginning. Also, sorry about this, my capture device is having issues. So you'll notice, you can hear the game playing in the background, I'm arresting somebody, but you can't see it because it's frozen on this, because it's having an encoder error. But all I'm doing is arresting another guy. It's nothing difficult. You go up to them, you flash the badge, you arrest them. And then this guy was watching me do it the whole time, and he didn't even notice. This is the hardest difficulty, and they're still completely brain dead, so the stealth in this game is a joke, guys. Don't worry about it. It's just, the one aspect of it that makes it tedious is it takes quite a long time to freeze and arrest a whole area of enemies, so if you mess up on the last two guys, you have to do the whole thing again, and it makes the game get boring quick. And it's one of those things you don't notice, which I'm definitely going to be talking about later on. But the unskippable cutscenes, they made a game that would have took me about 2.5 hours to record, 2 hours if I had not been as picky with the gameplay as I was, and it took me 7. And I know that 7 hours is not that long, and I didn't know the story, so experience in the story the first time is not too bad. But the idea of playing through it again and recording it on Hardline with all those unskippable stuff, and regardless of how good or how fast I am, it still takes me 7 hours, I really couldn't face that, because by the end of this game, I hate to say it, guys, the video is going to be really fun for you to watch if you're interested in just seeing an experience, and hopefully it'll be a good walkthrough for the people that need it, but I was bored of the game by the end. And that's another thing we're going to talk about in this 2.5 hours that I have you for. But it's not to say it's not fun, and it's not to say it's not good. It's just, I am at a point with video games where my attention, it fleets so quickly. And it's led to this. And in the history of my channel, I have refused to put up walkthroughs that weren't on the hardest difficulty, and I've had a couple of stumbles upon the way, which were always, deftly explained. And I've done it 2 in a row now. So maybe 2022 is the year of me slipping, I don't know, but ironically enough, I think Mirror's Edge and this project are some of the best work I've ever made. And I don't think that they're walkthroughs that people need because the games are old and people watching them are people that love the game and just want to experience it again and come back and check it out, or maybe you're just fans of my channel. But fundamentally, as much as these aren't on the hardest difficulty, which does hurt my credibility of what I do, I hope you can get some aid from this and enjoy the footage that's in these videos. So that is the reason, guys, why it's not on hardline difficulty. If I could have done it from the start, it wouldn't have been an issue, but I actually forgot that it wasn't the hardest one, even though I did know it, because if you go back to my balls deep, I'd done my research then, so all I can say is I got lazy and complacent. That's my bad. This is good, though. You know the cool thing about hardline difficulty on the stealth is the enemies are a little bit more attuned to the world, so they will react to certain things a bit quicker, and it makes it faster on some stealth sequences for taking people out. The second thing that's going to be happening on this walkthrough is I'm going to be trying to be a good cop. And you'll notice my expert level is 15. That's the max level. It shouldn't be 15 from a new game. It should be 0 and you build your way up. However, this is re-recording. And the idea is, everything you do in this game gets you points. As you can see, I'm showing you evidence places, and I'm actually looking for it and scanning it and editing between it, so you can see which ones I'm picking up, and then I move on. And the more you do that, the more you unlock, the higher that level increases. And the better a cop you are. So when I was first playing, I got really excited about doing like a points run. You know, I can do a supercop run where I arrest everybody, I maximise points by scanning them before I arrest them, I can scan all the stuff in the environment for those extra little bits of points, and I can keep levelling up, and by the end of it, I can get to like level 100. Level 100 supercop, you know, veteran difficulty, and that makes up for the fact it's not on hardline then, it's a bit more interesting. But it turns out, you cap that out really quickly if you arrest everybody. You cap it out by like mission 6 or something. And then it doesn't really feel like you're progressing towards anything because you're not unlocking more guns, you're not leveling that bar up. You're still getting points, and points are awesome, we like our candy, but it just doesn't have that same bite. And when you replay a level, you add to the points that you've amassed on it. So I couldn't even do, you know, like a perfect run of one level and single segment it and get a really, really good score on each level and provide that, because every time I restarted, I just added to the points and it made it look like I was doing really, really good when I wasn't. So this game has this super cool score system and this really unique take on Battlefield where you're arresting people and using your badge and using stealth and using combat if you need to. So it's got this hybrid of all these playstyles, which is really good and really, you know, it's diverse for what it is. But you can't really capitalise on it too much because in order to score really well, you have to play a very specific way. And the first time you mess that up and you try and restart it, it punishes you unless you're going to do some fancy exploitation of some saves. And, you know, I wasn't going to do that, so it's kind of brutal. And then the second part to that conversation, the reason I'm doing it now, guys, is because of how disappointing Battlefield 2042 was. It was my intention to make it so that 2042 was going to be a big emphasis on the channel. Oh, this is really cool, this, but watch this, I get robbed coming up. So you can tell this is visceral because it's one of those sequences where you can't move and you have to shoot and it's very cinematic. They did this in Dead Space 2. Cool section. I wish there was more of this, actually. A weird part, though, you hold W to hold your hand on her wound to stop her bleeding, and then when you start fighting, he just lets go of his hand, and she's bleeding and shit, and it's absolutely fine. But there's a sequence coming up, you'll have to slow it down and tell me if you think I missed, where I'm shooting at these dudes, it's right at the end, it's the final guy, I've got my gun on him, I shoot him twice where the torch is, I don't get any hits, and he shoots me. And I was really pissed off, because I murked that guy, and he still got one off. But 2042 was meant to be a big focus on the channel. I covered the shit out of its pre-release, I did the beta, I did montages, I did what to expect. I played a whole bunch of Battlefield 1 to prepare for it so that I could have some footage that might be a bit different. And I had a general level of skepticism going into it because I thought the game was going to be horrible, and it was. It was so much more horrible than I'd ever feared that it was almost hilariously bad, and you'll notice that you haven't seen any footage from it outside of some stream highlights, and the reason for that is purely based off the fact that I can't capture it. It kills my PC so much I simply can't do it, and it's a shame because I wanted that game to be really, really good. But instead, I thought we'd come back to a Battlefield that got a bit of a hard time when it came out, and was a lot better than I think people gave it credit for. Not only has this game got a good multiplayer, but it's also got a good campaign that's got a lot of love and attention put into it. There's performance capture, there's actual likeness to actors in this game. Like, the whole thing has had a lot of attention to it, and it is decidedly not like Battlefield. It's the least Battlefield ever, but it makes it kind of unique and kind of special because of that. As we move through here onto the the sequence in the parking garage. So let's talk about difficulty though. This is one of the things that I don't get about this game, which I find to be really interesting and also really frustrating. So this is the second hardest difficulty. It's called Veteran. When you're stealthing, you'll have no problems and it'll be a breeze, but when you start fighting, things get interesting. Because you can die in a second in this game. You can just get brrr and you're dead. You die way faster than you died on Halo in Legendary. You die way faster than you do in most games that I've covered in the last few years. But then there's times where they don't do that. So every so often you just kind of get murdered really quick. And you kind of go, whew, this is cool. This could be really hard if it was always like this and I could fight more. But the two things that combine to make this so fascinating to me is you generally don't do much shooting in this game outside of a handful of forced engagements that you can probably still skip. So you never truly get a chance to warm up to the aim and get your hand all good and be really lethal as you would do if it was a proper shooter. And then when you do, sometimes you get into a gunfight where no one hits you and you feel like a god, and other times they kill you so quickly you feel like they were pretending not to fight back. So it feels like the dice is really rigged at times, which is odd. And I don't really get why it's like that. And I would imagine that on Hardline, maybe that's a little bit more balanced out and they're a little bit more lethal more consistently, and that could make it more interesting. But I did a little bit of combat on Hardline and I really didn't notice too much of a difference. And I don't know if it's just because it's Battlefield and it's a little bit different and a bit goofy. But it's definitely an oddity that vexed me for pretty much the whole duration. Like on Hardline, if they took away your map and they took away the vision cones, then stealthing on this game would rely on a lot more faculties of the player to be successful. But there's so much stuff in this game that empowers you to an amazing degree that you will play this and probably think it's easy. I know I did back in the day when I tried to cover it, because I got it in that 2017 before I did the Balls Deep with the intentions of making a walkthrough, because I was looking for stuff to cover and I wasn't seeing much. And then I played it and I arrested everybody and it was just like, what's going on? This is way too strong. So the arrest mechanic that you're seeing here, guys, that you've been seeing for the last 10 minutes, the idea of it is kind of cool. You know, you're a police officer, you can't shoot these people until they shoot you. So it's not like you can walk around here and just stealth kill everybody, because that would be murder. You know, you have to respond to a threat. So instead you can tase people if you want to. I don't really like how the taser works and how it feels. It doesn't feel satisfying for me, so I don't use it too much outside of the Gauntlet. So instead, when you approach somebody and an icon comes above their head, you can press the command to say freeze. And this command is really interesting because it can freeze up to 3 criminals at once. And depending on where they're spaced and depending on your difficulty will depend on how easy it is to then arrest all those people. And the idea is you're supposed to look at the person you're arresting so that they don't do anything shifty and try to fight back. And if you freeze a bunch of people in an awkward section where you can't look at them all in a convincing manner, they have the potential to rebel. However, your partner will pacify that rebellion just by being close, and you'll hear her say like, I've got you covered, Nick, or I've got this one, something along that lines. And she helps you take down multiple guys. But like right now, see this? See that red mark on the screen? I have to look at these guys to make sure that they don't do anything funny. And then when you're in the animation, it seems like that you're not judged at all. You're okay if you're in the animation, you're fine. And in order to min-max, guys, what you want to do is, before you arrest people, you want to scan them. And you'll get the maximum amount of points. You'll get the 20 scan bonus, and then you'll get the 250 bonus for the arrest. I don't know if there's any more like score techniques than really that, but you want to also scan all of the items that you can interact with. So the tactical gearbox, if you scan that, I think you get 20 points. If you scan anything you have to hold and touch as part of progression to script an event, that will give you points as well. And then of course the evidence. And this game has one of the best collectible finders I've ever seen. It is a distance to collectible and an arrow pointing you in a direction. So you spend most of this game walking around like a Ghostbuster, you know, and I love that as an idea. I think it's really, really clever. And what this does is, when you do this, see how in the top left it says Hotshot Chain Supply completed? Each of the levels has evidence that goes towards side missions. And when you complete those side missions, you get access to new guns. And you don't need to do any of this, because the guns, they all work to the level of Battlefield's gun mechanics, which I'm not the biggest fan of in the earlier days. There's a lot more tap firing than I'd like. I'm a much more arcadey shooter, but I can get on with it. And if you start with the starting pistol and the starting assault rifle, you can do the whole game shooting and have no problems, because if your aim is decent, you'll be fine. But if you're like me, and you like the idea of using different guns, and you always want to be checking out iron sights and how the reloads look, and generally just the aesthetic and the design of weapons in first-person shooters, then I like to bring variety. I like to use a lot of different things. And throughout this walkthrough, you're going to see me use pretty much nearly all the guns that I want to use. Hopefully that makes it more interesting for you as a viewer. But these missions and this evidence, they unlock that stuff. And if you beat the game without doing that, you don't get access to some of the good guns. And I missed a few evidence pieces because I'm not that good of a supercop. And I ended up missing out on guns I'd really like to use, which is frustrating. I also got fucked picking up an M16, and then I restarted the checkpoint, and it didn't save me picking it up, and it's a gun you can only find. So I had to wait till the end of the game to use it, and it seemed really good. I use it in the penthouse shoothouse right at the end. But the evidence, the points, and the arrest mechanic, they all kind of combine to make this game not really a first-person shooter. Right here, I shot this guy because these people are shooting people and you can shoot them, and I wanted to have some violence in the guide. You probably can stealth this segment and knock these guys out to a decent degree if you really scrim it and really go for it, but the philosophy I had recording here was every segment that they allow you to stealth will try to supercop it. But if it does kick off, or I have the opportunity to kick off, I'm going to try and do that so I can do some shooting. Because I personally find the shooting more enjoyable to watch than I do the stealthing. And I need to practice so I can get my aim up. And the sensitivity in this game is kind of weird too. It was really fucking with me. But the badge and the freeze mechanic, it's so strong. And I thought that the game was going to be kind of like wrangling the guards. I thought you'd have to do certain things, baiting them and maneuvers and waiting for patterns to sync up, where people would stand together and you could freeze them and take them down as a group. I thought you were going to be herding and shepherding these people together on their paths. You really don't. You go into a room, you kind of size it up what they've done, and the environmental puzzle is already done for you. It's a formation of people that you have to take out in a certain order or use the distraction to move away. And other than that, it never really demands anything else on the player. It never makes you think out of the box or do anything too romantic, which is unfortunate because I think if they developed it, it wouldn't feel as tedious. I also think if the arresting takedown animation was a little bit quicker, it wouldn't feel as brutal to have to redo rooms. Because if you're redoing rooms, it gets tedious really quick. And it's unfortunate because I feel like there's a lot to this that could have been explored, but they kind of just, they had this idea, they battened down on it, and it is enjoyable for a casual run, definitely. But note to self as well, be careful mashing takedown, because if you do it, sometimes you swing your club, and if you smack them, you'll lose points and you'll set people off. But right now, something really important on the heads-up device. See the HUD and the map in the bottom left? Do you see how the map is blinking yellow now? That tells you that this guy knows where you are, but look how powerful this is. Just, you can literally walk up to these guys and freeze them, and it works. It's too strong, it really is. You truly are a super cop in this, it's ridiculous. Well, what happens in the map is it tells you what's going on. So when you get to the last guy in a room and you take them down, that yellow, if they know where you are, or that like assessment of caution, will then go green, telling you that you've done the sequence. And it's a really, really nice piece of HUD to help the player out and to know what he's doing in the world. Additionally, if you don't like the size of the map and you don't think there's enough detail, you can go into the settings and make it much bigger. Battlefield is known for being able to customize its map on those later games, and doing so is really, really good because it shows you so much. You can't do that on Battlefield 2042 because that game's a giant pile of dog shit. So here we are playing a much better game. And right here, I am vexed by this evidence that's around here. It's on the photocopier, but I've not noticed it. I did do this level again, but one of the problems when you do the level again is it's already clocked a lot of your points, so you don't get them popping up on the screen the same, and I like the idea of the points popping up. And a little piece of behind-the-scenes trivia for people who are observant. If you see me in a gunfight, guys, where I pull the scanner out and it doesn't say marking bonus or tagging bonus or scan bonus, it means I've already scanned them on a previous attempt and I fucked up and I had to restart. So if you want to see the mistakes, that's what you look for. But we're going to be scanning some of the evidence here. I don't find all of the evidence, unfortunately. I missed one, and I think it's his body, right? He was green. If you go up to his body and you hold square on him, you'll touch him up and get some evidence, and I didn't realise that's how that worked, so I ended up missing that particular point. But coming up here, there is going to be a firefight. This is kind of a fun level, this, because it mixes both stealth and violence. And not a lot of the missions coming up will do that. Some of them are very narrative and you don't really do much. And I don't know how you feel about that, guys. Can you get into a really good story where it's just story stuff, or do you need some gameplay too? Because I can do a narrative if I'm interested in the narrative, but I found this narrative, as much as it was very, you know, they went for it. There's a lot of production value here. I found it to be the king of the cop cliches, and almost every story beat was so obvious and so foreseeable that it's like I've already seen it on some, you know, standardized cop show. Like procedural cop show, the video game. And there's nothing wrong with that, and that's probably what they were aiming for, a bit of tongue-in-cheek. Oh, by the way, when you're on this roof, these guys are going to walk because they know exactly where you are because they're all cheaters. Filthy aimbotters. Wall hackers, so they walk backwards, pivoting, looking at you perfectly, waiting to shoot you, but they can only shoot you when they have a clear line on your body, and this lip up here is a clipping spot, so you can shoot them before they even stand a chance. And then all you do now is finish off the final guy and then go and get in the Jeep for the driving sequence. When I was first playing this, it did make me smile too, because it's been a long time since I've played a wealth of shooter campaigns that go through the tropes, that go through the classic shooter things of stealth level, you know, violence level, on-rail shooting segment, driving level, you know, so on and so forth. So coming to this game and jumping into the cars and having to drive, even though nothing happens and you are never called upon to do anything interesting, this is literally just a loading screen with some pretty visuals. That's all it is. You don't really do much. It's kind of insane to me. And they happen quite a lot, these driving sequences too. And when this game first came out, if I'd have played this, I would have been so dead behind the eyes and exhausted, I would have just been falling asleep. But because it's been so long since we've had so many shooters, and I'm kind of hungry again for some of the cliched generic stuff that we got so much of, you know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So when I was playing this, I was legitimately having a good time. I saw it coming a mile away. I knew exactly what was going to happen because I've done it 100 times before. But it does have a charm. That being said though, I do feel that Visceral could have done a lot better with this. And it does make me beg the question, is this intentionally reserved because they didn't want to blow their load too soon? They didn't want to go way too big so that they'd have problems with pacing and escalation? Or is it meant to be kind of grounded so that it doesn't come across as, you know, Michael Bay spectacular like a lot of Call of Duties do? And maybe this was in direct reflection of that. COD goes so big all the time, it's exhausting for 4 hours, you can never catch your breath, and it's just a constant peak, 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 right? No valley. Did they want to bring it down and ground it and make it feel like it was actually something that could happen, and that's why conceptually it's a little bit more mundane? Answers on a postcard, right? Anyhow, we're back to the original recording here. We've been on the original recording for a while now, so you'll notice that when I'm scanning people, I'm leveling up. I'm becoming the supercop. I'm becoming the Detective John Kimble that we all have inside. And here we're going to be using the grapple gun and the abseil gun, or the zipline gun, sorry. Which I think this is really fascinating. There's something like this in Battlefield 2042, which is a bit more streamlined and a bit quicker. If the grapple in this was as cool as the one in that, I would probably have used it a lot more. But the idea that this exists, I think is cool. And we're moving into quite a sandbox hubby experience here, because this is the Episode 3 Gator Bait. This is one of the longer missions in the game. And you've already noticed, if you've been watching, that the editing on this is kind of crazy. We're jumping between sequences, we're jumping into cutscenes and then cutting immediately away. All the downtime, all the low moments, all the kind of narrative and character building and the quiet pacing sequences have been skipped into something happening. And I did that so that it would be more expedient and easier for the commentary, and also easier for the viewer. And if you play this game, guys, it'd be interesting to see just how much of the differences that you spot. Because I do think if you've come off playing this and you really like the game, or you really know it, watching this video you're going to see a lot of silly moments where I've gone in there and adjusted some stuff. So let me know if you appreciated them, because I have a lot of fun making the silly stuff that goes into a lot of my walkthroughs. And when the game is not too difficult or too demanding, I generally find ways to occupy myself that involve, you know, the editing side, and that's exactly what this one was in many ways. But we'll scan these guys, we'll arrest them, we'll get level 8, and then we're going to be progressing into the boat after we've scanned some stuff. And as you can see, there's a lot of evidence in this level. I'm not going to be finding it all, but I'm gonna have a good go. Oh, and another thing to mention too, some of the weapons that you find on the ground, if you pick them up, you will acquire them. I know I mentioned about the M16, but there are guns in this game that the average guys are using that you want to grab, and then you'll be able to use them. And the more expert points you get, the higher your levels, the more attachments you can put on them. And the attachments in this game are kind of interesting because they seem to be quite standardised. It seems like all the guns have the same stuff. I don't know if that's laziness or if that's just how the guns work, if that's realistic. And I don't really know too much about Hardline because I never played the multiplayer, even though when I've gone back and watched footage of it, I think it looks really, really fun. It looks like quite a fast battlefield for the time, and I know that it died really quickly thanks to some bad balance and some questionable choices, and people really didn't give it a chance. But all of the people who I watch who have really good mouse and keyboard aim and play very aggressively thought that Hardline was really fun outside of its balance. So there's definitely chops there, I think. And on the attachment front, I would imagine the multiplayer might differ to the campaign for what you want to use, but I just went with pretty much anything that helped recoil for my playstyle, and I think that was heavy barrel stubby grip. Heavy barrel stubby grip, and then I'll put like a delta sight or something on. The optics in this game, there's quite a lot of them, but most of them I really don't like. And it's not necessarily because they're bad optics, it's just a preference thing. And then this game, for some reason, doesn't let you fuck with the FOV in the campaign. It only lets you do that in the multiplayer. Same with the affected FOV. So when you aim in this game, it gets really hard to see. And I couldn't find any way to make that not be a thing. And it's kind of interesting because the PC port for this has got some weird stuff in it. And if you go back and watch the Balls Deep, I talk about all the settings and the options in this game, and I was very impressed. It just goes to show how little I knew about PC, and how I didn't really understand some of the things that I would grow to understand later on and then hold as something dear to having a good time with video games. So this PC port is decent in many ways, but it's also kind of a disgrace too. The first thing that's really odd about it is that it boots through a browser. You have to go to the Battlelog browser to boot the game, and the first time I tried to cover this, when I got it off of Game Pass with the EA thing, it wouldn't launch. It just, every time I pressed play after I downloaded all that bullshit, and I downloaded the game and I installed it, and I tell it to go, it would just leave me on this browser hanging. And I just didn't know what was going on, and then it would not respond, and then it would just crash. So that was the official version, guys. The official version via Game Pass on PC. And it refused to work because of this weird browser integration. No idea, right? So in the end, I end up getting a, shall we say, not so EA endorsed version. And that works fine. No browser needed. However, it has those monstrous loads, which is, I don't know if it's part of how they got around that or just how the game was, because, you know, 2015's a few years ago, maybe it just loaded. And then there's a handful of things that get in the way of the game being as good as it can be. So once again, frame rate. If you boost your frame rate on this game, some weird things can happen. Really weird things. And I've got a couple of them recorded. I don't know if I'm going to share them. One of them is a guy in a cutscene for one frame flickering into the shot for no reason, and then disappearing, and then 5 seconds later he pulls a hostage into the room. Like, it's the strangest thing. But the worst contender was the Sovereign Land. So, episode 8, there's a sequence where you get arrested and thrown into a prison cell. If you play that section on PC, regardless of frame rate, it will never work. You will softlock the game and die. And what happens is, it's meant to be a cutscene where the guy you're talking to tells you a way out of the cell and opens a door for you, but instead, he stands in the corner, you're just stood there with handcuffs on, you go towards the door, a guard goes, "What was that noise?" walks through the door, and shoots you dead, and you can't do anything because you're handcuffed, and it says on the screen, press G to tell him to freeze, but it doesn't work, and he just beats you to death. And every time you do that, the checkpoints are so fucking bad that you have to drive for 5 minutes through the desert to get back to that cutscene, to watch an unskippable cutscene, to then get absolutely assassinated on the other side of it on a glitched, soft-locked game. And I did it like 3 times and I couldn't tell what was happening, so I capped the frame rate at 60 FPS and I was hoping that would fix it. Still happened. So I googled it, and it turns out it just happens to everyone on PC. And they never fixed it. So this game has a game-breaking glitch on PC that you will probably come across, and they never addressed it. And I have no idea why. That to me is an absolute disgrace and just boggles my fucking mind. But here we are. And you might be wondering, well, Chris, how did you get past it? So, I found a YouTube video, as we always do, of a guy who's found a way through it, and it said it worked, and I tried it. So what you have to do is you have to go into the console with the tilde key as the cutscene's playing before you go to the jail cell, and at the end of the cutscene, you have to go in there and change the variable frame rate. So it says like game time dot max variable FPS, and you change it to 3 frames per second. And the game plays in 3 FPS. And for whatever reason, because the game is moving so slowly, it doesn't fuck the scripting up and not trigger that cutscene. So you get the cutscene, you recover, and then you go into the console command again, and you put the frame rate back to 200 or whatever it caps at. And then you're okay. But it took me like 40 minutes to do a sequence that should have took 30 seconds. And that's in the game! You know, that's not just me being unlucky with technology, as I often am. That's not, you know, me finding a problem that doesn't exist. There are threads and threads of people that have come across this, and they just never came back and said, sorry guys, we'll fix it. And I just think that's horrendous. So on that alone, I don't recommend this game on PC at all. I don't recommend the port. Unless you're playing multiplayer. If you're playing multiplayer, it's probably dead, but it probably works quite well. But between the FOV ADS being affected and only applying to multiplayer, so it's really difficult when you ADS in, and then just some of the problems with the frame rate stuff, it makes the PC port, as good as it is for the time in some ways, it's kind of bad in some other ways. And the biggest one for me was the mouse sensitivity. I messed with the mouse sensitivity as best as I can. I used a calculator. I tried to get it as good as I could physically get it, and it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel bad, which is good, but it didn't feel right. So if you think my aim in this is trash, guys, I do apologise. I was trying. But this sequence here, for the people that watch that Balls Deep, this was one of the sequences featured in that video. And I don't know if I take the same path here. It would be interesting to go back and check. But you know how I mentioned that the arrest mechanic and the scanning mechanic is really powerful? Do you see that question mark that's on that guy that I can see through the wall that gives me all the information I need to completely exploit him without being able to get direct line of sight? I think that's way too powerful. I think if they wanted to go in and balance this game, that should disappear on Hardline. You should just get rid of the HUD. Remove the HUD on Hardline. That way, you don't have all this information. Look at the map. I know exactly where people are staring. I know exactly where people are moving. I can see them through walls. I have too much information. And that enables me to come through this entire place and arrest everybody effortlessly. Although if you do fuck this up, it's quite a long journey to do it all over again, and it's a bit tedious, but you'll get there. It is interesting though when you do these animations to arrest people, because he throws them down. Sometimes you throw people into geometry and throw them through walls and do all kinds of really weird things. And I need to mention something you're going to see later on that screwed me over. When you take somebody down and knock them out or arrest them, and then you go to the tactical box where you can change your weapons, sometimes it can change the state of the world. I didn't know about this until the end in Sovereign Land. I knock a guy out inside of a trailer park in a trailer. I touch a box, he teleports in the same prostration state on the ground through the trailer into the open area, and a guard sees him, and all the guards get alerted and start looking for me. And you can see it happen. I'm going to tell you before it happens, guys. If you look at the map, you can see his arrow, and you can see when I touch the box, he just teleports. His arrow moves. It moves like at 2 meters. And I end up shooting my gun when I was doing it perfectly stealthily. And that's good that I learned that, because I can warn you now, be very careful messing with your guns during mid-stealth, because it can lead to issues. And as long as you avoid that, you'll be fine. And what you're watching here is one of the few areas in the walkthrough which is not going to be as clean as it could have been, which is me looking for the evidence. I don't actually know where it is, guys. I'm going to be using my scanner. And I left it in because there's so much of this game where you're not playing, and I wanted to at least have a decent chunk of the game to talk over. I found the Mirror's Edge commentary to be not quite enough time to talk about what I wanted to mention. And sometimes that can be a really, really good thing, because it means that the commentary's flying and you can put it out there and you don't feel tedious or bored or frustrated. But at other times, you need a little time to get across all the ideas that you're thinking of. And the problem with the commentary that is this large format and off the cuff is you have all these ideas coming into it of things you want to say, and they're very good and concise and will help the viewer. But then you start talking and you start rambling about dicks for 40 minutes, and when you come back you forgot. And then right at the end it'll come back to you and you don't have any time to elaborate. So if you've ever wondered why the commentaries are kind of all over the place, it's unfortunately the consequence of owning my brain. But we go into the building, we get some evidence, and now we come outside and there's a couple of guys to arrest. One of these guys is using a UMP, which is a really good idea to grab because it's a cool gun. The other guy's using a shotgun we don't have yet, so pick that one up as well. And then we're going to be going over to the stadium and doing a stealth segment. I'm currently rocking the P90 with a sight on it, which is kind of nice. I don't mind this iron sight either. I think they did a pretty good job with that UMP one. I was very critical of Battlefield's iron sights for a long time, because some of them are terrible, especially Bad Company 1, Bad Company 2. Some of those iron sights, they look like Victorian torture devices. But DICE got better with that. They got a lot more aesthetically pleasing and a lot less realistic, which is definitely what I want. But here we go. We transition all of the driving. I do apologise to people that like watching the Everglades sequence. You do enough driving in that sequence so that I didn't want to force it on other people if they watch this. And this game does show you on the map exactly where to go at almost all moments with a symbol. So if you come to this video and you complain that you don't know where to go because I didn't show you, I hope you realise that your map shows you exactly where to go. And all the parts I've put in this video are the parts where you might actually struggle. Not that I think you will, because this game is very, very manageable. But if you shoot, that's when things get interesting. If you do the shooting, you're probably going to have a much worse time. And there you go, she checked us out, she helped us. Good for you. And it reminds me though, you know, Hardline. Hardline's a Battlefield that people like to criticise. But as a package, this game came out feature-rich. You can't say the same about the new one, you know? Well, this is interesting too. This is the distraction mechanic that they introduced at the start of the game. I talked over this. So, this has been in so many games that it feels so alien having it in a Battlefield, even though Battlefield has used it before. And it uses it again, doesn't it? It uses it in Battlefield 5's campaign. You can throw rocks. But the idea of this is you throw the casing, you move people away, and then you arrest them. And if you look on the map when you arrest them, you can see an area of influence that they have when you interact with them. If there's any other enemies in that area of influence, you will provoke them and it'll go bad. This right here, you can arrest all 3 people. It looks like it shouldn't work, and later on I actually get fucked in a situation like this. But this one worked well, and she covers me so I can take them out and we can get all those delicious points. Remember to scan them if you haven't scanned them as well. This might be me losing out on some points here, so my high score is going into the toilet. But make sure you scan them, you get the tag, and then you can go and grab them. They also have an AKM. This is the first opportunity in the game, I think, to get the AKM, which is the only AK derivative in this game that I saw. And it's worth using, but it's got a lot of recoil. I don't know if the recoil is visual, but when I was first using it, it felt like it was really, really kicking. And disabling alarms gives you 200 points as well, so always do that. If you don't disable the alarms and you kick it off, it will spawn reinforcements and things will get a lot more interesting again. But as I was saying, the new game focused on multiplayer. You know, they focused on what Battlefield does best, and they made a big emphasis on that. And now that the game's come out, and it's lazy, terribly designed, buggy, half-assed garbage, all it does is make them look even sillier. Ooh, this is the first gunfight right here. The first true gunfight. I'm using the AKM and my aim is not there yet, so bear with me. This game also has an automatic lean, and I couldn't find a way to turn it off. So if you see me leaning, that's never intentional, I don't lean. I didn't lean in fear, I'm not leaning in this. And that's an absolute lie. I did lean in fear, but that was a long time ago. But here is the gunfights, and if you watch in the bottom right, you can see how quick your life regens in this game. A couple of things to bear in mind if you're struggling on shootouts or struggling on the game. You can wear armor in this. I don't know if it's any good, but it probably is. Additionally, you can carry a med crate, just like you can in Battlefield, is it 3 and 4? And you can dump the crate down and it will heal you. So you can heal yourself and proactively be aggressive. I put it on just in case, but I didn't end up using it. And I get stuck on her just here, so that's kind of frustrating, but see you later, friend. One of the things I struggled with in this game was the time to kill. I found it really difficult to tell when to stop shooting people, because the information I was getting when I was shooting them didn't always seem to be consistent. I don't know if anybody else had that, but like that just there, real nice. I get the red X tells me he's dead. That one, I had hit him a few times but did die. That one didn't even get hit markers on that one, that was weird. Like, it just... There was times where I really felt confused if I'd actually won the fight or not. And I am assuming right here that if I was on Hardline, I would have been dead then, because I'm going to be very aggressive. You don't have to be this aggressive, but you know, I like to play aggressively. Hi, we're clear. And usually, you don't see the times when my aggressive play fails. You only see the times when it succeeds, so it makes me look like a wizard. But be under no illusion, ladies and gentlemen. I lose a lot before I get some of the gameplays. And it's just the nature of the difficulties. If the difficulty's kind of easy, then it's quite quick and not a problem. I fucked that up there. I cancelled the reload. This is the UMP with a different optic on it. Ooh, that's something I need to mention too. This game has penetration. And there's times when they wallbang you, and there's nothing scarier than being wallbanged by AI that knows exactly where you are. So if you're stood behind cover and no one's got line of sight on you and you're still taking damage, lay down. It's really the only thing you can do. And it happened to me a handful of times and I was really confused. Just then, guys, the reason I didn't shoot that person is I thought it was her. I thought it was the fucking cop, just like squatting and pretending to help. Turns out, wasn't. And I got lucky. But there goes that guy. Now we're back in the warehouse and we have to do some scanning. There's a decent amount of traversal here and backtracking that you have to do to go through the crime scene. I'm not going to show you any of that, guys. We're just going to show you some evidence and then some of the scripters that lead to the next segment. But at this moment, we're 47 minutes into this game. I think we're on mission 4. Episode 4. So that's close to halfway through the game. To get here, it might take you 4 hours. And it's 47 minutes of gameplay, really. Not even that, there's a lot of cutscenes in that. Maybe 40 minutes of gameplay, at most. That's kind of how much you're wrestling with. And usually, when you play a difficult shooter on its hardest difficulty, you might do a 5-minute segment, and it might take you 30 minutes, because you died a ton. And then you combine all those across a playthrough, and the length of that encounter is all the fails, all the times you didn't do it right. Because it adds up. Small sections repeated repeatedly, ad nauseum, add to some playtime. Oh, by the way, whenever you come to a screen like this and he doesn't know the code, if you put your scanner on, it will check the heat signature on the fingerprints of what button was pressed, and your guy will then automatically know the code. So if you interact with it again, he'll go in and he'll do it, and then you'll be able to get on to the next sequence. But doing that enabled us to unlock the Tech 9, I think, or one of the sidearms. The only sidearms I really wanted to try were the automatics, and I didn't unlock any of them. They have an automatic Beretta, a Raffica, and they have an automatic Glock, a G18. But I didn't do the prerequisites to figure that out. And right here, I'm leaving in some footage of actually just navigating, because I think that's the end. I think all we need to do now is go down and get back to the van. And this level doesn't really have too much gameplay in this sequence alone, so I wanted to at least give you something, because it does jump around this project. It's kind of crazy. Oh, and I have the gas mask on. I forgot about that. So, I put the gas mask on thinking that I could put the gas grenade on and then gas a room going with the gas mask and just be an absolute beast and kill everybody with immunity. And then I don't think I had the grenade, or I couldn't find the grenade. So I started playing remembering that I got the gas mask on. I put it on to see what it looked like. Hated how it looked because I didn't think it looked as cool as I wanted it to. And then I couldn't take it off. And I couldn't find the binding to take it off either. So I ended up playing the whole level with the fucking gas mask on, even though I restarted the mission and I still had it on. Which was certainly something. But yeah, note to self, the gas mask is permanent. But this section is one of the biggest stealth sections so far. This can be kind of awkward, this one, because it's very easy for people to stumble into what you're doing, and there's a lot of people in a lot of places, and the real difficulty is having the patience to repeat it if you make a mistake, because the takedown animation and the arrest, once you've done it for a few hours, it gets old. It gets really old, and I just wish there was more. I wish they'd done 3 to 4 animations, and it played one randomly, so you got the idea of it being a bit different. I just feel like there could have been more to it, and it would have alleviated some of that. I wonder if they could have given you the option to use like riot rounds or stun rounds, and you could have gone on a bit of a tear and shot everybody. That could have been cool. I suppose it would have been really, really powerful, running around with like those airfoil rounds from Splinter Cell and just dunking people. On the flip side though, if this does kick off, there's a lot of people to shoot on some different angles, so you can do some fun aim stuff. But we are tied into this obligation of being a supercop, and supercop doesn't shoot everybody unless it absolutely has to. Some of the locations in this game are kind of interesting as well. This game does not go to the places I thought it would go to, and it definitely deserves a feather in its cap for that, because you could expect so many things from, you know, generic cop show about drug cartels and whatnot, and instead it kind of goes to some of the more down-tempo, dull areas. It's definitely more Training Day than, say, Miami Vice. Oh, there it was. Pressed the wrong button. Look at this guy. It's Clarence Boddinger looking dude. So how many have we got left? Guy directly over there. And then we have a contract. So do you notice how on the hood here, one of the people has a like a cephalic profile? It's the bust of the head and the neck. He's directly below us now. That signifies that he is a contract. He is a VIP. He's somebody that if you arrest them, you get a bonus. So if you want to be a super cop and you want to unlock some stuff, you want to make sure that you always apprehend these guys and you don't kill them. And right now, this guy's coming up some stairs and he's heard something. And you can do the oldest trick in the book here, where he starts coming towards the stairs and you drop down behind him and deal with him. Like, this is some... I can't fall off here though, because the fall would notify him, so I'm just going to freeze him there, drop, and then we're going to deal with him. This game has interesting mantling too. Coming off of Mirror's Edge, which was 2008, to a 2015 game where the mantling is somehow worse. Kind of weird. But whenever you do a stealth section in its entirety, it will generally say you can get into the door now. But I noticed that there was 2 guys that I avoided. 2 guys on the street, one there and one on that roof. And because we're super cop and we want the points... hang on, there's a few more guys that we avoided. Damn, there's a whole bunch. We're going to go and get them. And this is the sequence where, if this was on Hardline and I did come back to the game, I would just get to that roof and crowbar the door. I wouldn't take down anybody but the people that you need to trigger that particular dialogue to get into the warehouse. And I'll probably be able to shave maybe an hour off the playtime. Especially if I streamline the editing and get rid of all the cutscene stuff and just go gameplay, 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 gameplay. So fingers crossed, if that mod ever does exist, if you're listening to this and you make mods and you're like, I want to see that video, I'll make that mod. If that happens, I am a man of my word and I will do that. Because I'd be lying if I told you that it wasn't frustrating to beat this game and see it tell me that I wasn't on the hardest difficulty, because I honestly thought I was. I just thought the game was really easy. That right there, I thought the guy on the roof had seen me and I thought he'd shoot at me, so I wanted to shoot him. But it turns out he's going to go on a bit of a wander. He's going to go walk about and he's not going to find anything because we're going to arrest him.
Search everywhere.
And there's a guy over here. The symbol there denotes that they know something's up and they're patrolling. But it doesn't seem to make a difference.
Okay, you got it.
Which is kind of interesting, because you know, if you think about stealth and stealth games and their systems, stealth games are usually quite binary. There's something that works, and then there are situations and game states that don't work. A lot of the times, you are punished for going into situations that don't work and attempting that they will. This game's not like that. It's weird. Like, think about Splinter Cell, right? On Splinter Cell, if you try to knock somebody out from the front, you have to hit them a lot. If they're alerted, they take 2 melee attacks from behind. If they don't know you're coming, they take 1. So if you surprise them, boom, 1, they go down. If they know where you are, they take a lot more, and you're punished because you didn't surprise them, you didn't maintain stealth. If you go up to somebody from in front in Splinter Cell, try to take them down, you're going to get your ass beat. Unless you're playing on the later ones, where Sam got really, really efficient and really lethal. You know, Chaos Theory onwards, Sam could deal with people from the front a lot better. He could really get in there, and it was good. And admittedly, you could take people down from the front in the early games, but it involved standing in front of them awkwardly and doing the elbow clop, and nobody wants to do that. Whereas in this game, no matter if they know where you are, well, maybe not so much that, no matter if they know something's up, or if they're completely oblivious, you can attack them from any direction. That right there, by the way, is the very same glitch that's in Battlefield 1. I tried to mantle that rail, and I went prone. And I don't know if you guys are BF1 guys, but that's one of the most frustrating things in BF1. It's enough to make you want to shoot yourself. It is unbearably annoying, and it happens all the time. So I think it's really funny that that legacy bullshit is present in the engine, even in this game. Because I believe, wasn't Battlefield 1 the year after this? 2016? But we get more... leveling up our expert levels, becoming the greatest cop we can be, and now we're in this grow house warehouse. But this is a good example here of what I mean, guys. In that previous stealth sequence, I mentioned that there's no moments where you really have to sync up patterns in order to take down multiple people. There's never scenarios where they put you in a state where if you go up to somebody and you say freeze, somebody's overlooking it and goes, hang on a second, you didn't freeze me, what are you doing? Bang, bang, bang. This is the kind of patterns and the kind of problems that the players meant to solve that Visceral kind of didn't do. And I don't know if it's intentional. I don't know if they wanted you to maybe mess up or maybe not commit to stealth and do some shooting, but for a game where stealth is this powerful and this easy, you would think that there would be more demand on the player of the patterns. So just here, there's 3 guys there, and there's a couple of guys patrolling around. I don't really want to risk the group, so I'm going to move this guy away by using the distraction. Look at what this does. Oh, by the way, too, when you crouch, you are silent in this game, apparently. Which is interesting. The load tip says that. Make no sound. On Hardline difficulty, I thought that the sound you made would be a bit more heavily punished. And it is more punished than Veteran, but nowhere near as much as I thought it was going to be. Like, if you go back and play Hitman 2. Tell me how that goes, guys. Go back, Hitman 2, Silent Assassin. Go try and sneaking up on a guy from behind. See how well it goes. That's punishment. That's also questionably functioning game too. But we've come a long way from those days of sneaking behind somebody silently, them turning around when you're 2 meters away from you, and then they proceed to walk away from you while glancing back at a speed that's faster than your crouch. Like, we've come a long way since then. But there has to be a middle ground, doesn't there, between a system that's difficult and barely works, and a system that is so overpowered that it takes no effort to work perfectly every time. And I'm quite the purveyor, you know, of stealth. I've stealthed in a lot of games. I do like it. They're one of my favourite genres. I'm definitely a little bit burned out on Hitman because I feel like that Hitman 1, 2, was it just 1 and 2 that they brought out? I feel like those games were all so similar that I'd put so much in the previous one that when the new one came out, it was diminished returns and it felt exhausting. And that is my fault. I did put like 300 hours into that game, so when you come back to it and it feels the same in almost every conceivable way, it feels like you're going directly back into that burnout, and that's the reason I didn't cover the new one on the channel, guys. I'm going to at some point. I did cover it on stream. I've done every level, suit only, Silent Assassin, only using the fiber wire. I've done my own path on every level, and they're good. And I think they're going to make for some good videos, and I think you'll enjoy them. It's just, I tried to record them and I was so disheartened, I stopped. And for me, I don't want to do this unless I believe it and unless I'm in it. My passion and my drive, it only works when I'm in the mood for it. And when I'm not in the mood for it, forcing it, unless you're paying me, I'm not good at that. I'd rather focus on what I'm good at and push that direction than pretend to be something I'm not. And kind of lose everything that makes my videos different. So, for the Hitman fans out there that want to see that project, it is coming. It might just take a year or two. But here is the lower area in the grow factory, and we're just going to be decimating dudes with this takedown. Unbelievable. Like, you just cruise through here and get rid of everything. And then after this, we're going to get into a gunfight, and this is... Hang on, that was weird. I don't know what that was. Something weird happened. There's going to be a gunfight after this, and it's your first opportunity to pick up an M16. You definitely want to do that, and you don't want to make the mistake of restarting the checkpoint to get some nicer gameplay like I did. But I mentioned earlier on that the checkpoints in this game are kind of shit, but that's a good thing. I should probably talk about that. I wish the checkpoints in this game were a little bit better, because I think then it would be less boring. I think it wouldn't be as exhausting and as brain dead going back through a room and putting everybody down and handcuffing them because you fucked up on the final guy because you did something silly. However, it would make a game that is already easy even easier, so I understand that critique. And on the other side, it made it very easy to edit as far as finding the flaws and finding the success. Because on your wavelength, you can see when you mess up in this game, because it loads, and when it loads, it does so quietly. So the game has a normal audio state, and then the load has its low audio state, and all you do is you look for the dip in the wavelength, and boom, there's your mistake. So if you find the start of an encounter, you can find the frame where the encounter starts and begins, and you can cut there, and then you can scrim along and see them go past all the mistakes instead of having to watch them through to see if those are the ones, and then get to the one where you're successful. And then you sync those two up, and you've saved yourself a ton of time. And depending on how hard the encounter is, if you didn't do it that way, or you didn't know to do it that way, you might have had to watch an hour, 2 hours worth of footage of you making mistakes, whereas instead you skip right to the end and find the solution. But we meet up with Stoddard, and then we're now going to be working together to get out of this burning building. And immediately, guys, keep the M16. That guy he just shot has the gun, so if you grab it, this gun is awesome, but you're going to notice there's going to be a transition coming up, because I restarted checkpoint, and it just stole it from me, and I was really salty about that. But I'm going to scan these guys to maximise on points when I kill them. It's nowhere near as much points as you would get if you knocked them out, because I think you get 100 for knocking them out. I don't know if you can wait for these guys to de-aggro and then arrest them. That would be the ultimate squeezing, min-maxing point run. And someone's probably done that. But that someone can enjoy the rest of their life, because I just don't have the patience to face those unskippable cutscenes and those load screens.
Come on, Stoddard.
But have I mentioned that this is a pretty beautiful game? That's one of the things I love about coming back to DICE games on PC. Regardless of how you feel about the games, except for 2042, that game's fucking ugly. Like, their games look beautiful. And this is me running pretty much everything on low too, so I can get good frames. I'm aiming for 240 FPS and I'm getting it. And the game just looks and runs really nice, all considered. But there's the end of the warehouse. I think now that there's a big storm coming through, this is a precursor to the wonderful mechanic in 2042 that was meant to be dramatic weather, like floods and volcanoes and tornadoes and all kinds of crazy weathers, but instead, every level gets a tornado, because they didn't make anything else, and that's it. One level has a radio tower that falls down, and it's not even as impressive as the Levolution that was featured in an earlier Battlefield, so GG DICE, you really fucked us on that one. But moving forward, we're rocking the Deagle now with the green laser. I think we've got the AKM with a reflex on it, and we're moving towards this mall here. There's a bunch of stealth sequences in this particular section, and they're all really easy too.
Hands up. Police.
I like mall segments though in games. There's something about the neon and all the Art Deco that some of them have, and the different architecture that just makes it cool and appealing, and the fashion posters and just all the rampant consumerism and media. I think it makes for a really good aesthetic, and it reminds me of 80s action movies where there's always a chase. There's always a chase of some questionable Eastern European guy who's actually American putting on a shitty accent, and he's always got an Israeli Uzi, and it's always some kind of gratuitous chase through the mall where civilians are getting shot, absolutely RoboCop to bits, and no one blinks an eye, and you're just like, oh my god, I love the 80s, this shit's so good.
Put your hands up.
But what would have happened, do you think, if Visceral would have got a really good reception with this game? Everybody would have loved it. The multiplayer would have got the balance it deserves. Everybody would have embraced it instead of being fucking Luddites and shouting at the sky. What do you think they would have gone on to do? Do you think they would have gone on to do Hardline 2 and develop it into something else? Do another kind of like hard-boiled cop adventure? maybe focus on a different aspect, like ATF or something, or CIA. Because if they made it now, think about if they made it now, it would be so inspired by things like Sicario. There's so many of those kind of gritty cop shows now, isn't there? Those gritty, like Black Ops, Black Site, off the books operations in questionable legalities. That stuff's everywhere. It would have been a combination, I would imagine, of a whole host of those different things. And it could have been really good. Think about the shooting in Battlefield now as well. You know, like, lots of people like the shooting in Battlefield 1. I'd like the shooting in Battlefield 1 if they got rid of the random bullet deviation and the spread. If they took that stuff out, I think it'd be fine. Battlefield 5 was way better, but the decoupling center screen for recoil was insane. And then having random recoil calculations on top of random recoil was also insane. Like, it just makes no sense to me as well. It also makes no sense that they can give PC so much more recoil when there's no crossplay on that game. So it's just like, why? Why do we get more recoil and then we get fucked trying to control it because it can't be controlled because it's not a pattern and it can't be learned? I just, that to me is mind-boggling. But just imagine a perfect world where Battlefield's gunplay is really, really good for everybody to enjoy. Very skillful, high skill ceiling, you know, but still accessible and still enjoyable. Imagine that in a modern iteration on the new engine with I'm not going to say good graphics because these graphics are amazing, but with modern graphics and all the, you know, advances in technology and design with good gunplay, it could have been so great. And a good campaign too. Isn't it funny that we got so sick of campaigns because they were so ubiquitous and they all copied from each other because it was just aping Call of Duty? Whereas now, we just don't get them. You know, Halo comes out, and it's decent, if you're a Halo fan, and everybody loses their mind thinking it's the best thing in the world because you sat here sucking dog shit. And when you're sucking dog shit, like human shit probably tastes better than that. Incrementally, and thus is better, you know? And that's the problem. When you get so used to games being disappointing and being terrible, that you start thinking, you know, fool's gold is the real thing, and it's not. And it's frustrating to me because all I want video games to be the best they can be. I do everything I can to play them in the best format that I can, and I have a lot of good time doing that when it's reciprocated, but it so often isn't, because the industry is too busy looking at ray tracing on machines that literally can't do it. It's too busy looking at resolutions on machines that literally can't do it right now. You know? We're aiming for frame rates we achieved on fucking consoles when I was a boy. Like, it makes no sense to me that that's the industry standard. We're not where we should be, technologically, aspirationally, and creatively, and that frustrates me. And it leads me to sharing my frustrations on Battlefield Hardline walkthroughs. I think this is the last guy here. I could have just walked up to him and froze him, but I was paranoid I was going to fuck it up and have to do the whole thing again, because I must confess, at this point, I was kind of bored of the stealth. But I'd already committed to being a supercop, and supercops keep their word. And then when you do that, you hear your other guy talk, and it tells you that you've done the sequence, and then you can leave. And there's just another one of those doors, and it's another crowbar door, which I find to be really funny. Coming off of Mirror's Edge, where you would go to those elevators and they would be loading the next zone and masking it in the elevator, this game uses these crowbars, and usually the crowbar animation is quite lengthy, but I've edited it so that it looks like my guy's really good at opening doors. Your guy's not as good as my guy opening doors, because I'm that good at this game. But in reality, I've just cut the fucking animation because it plays so goddamn much it pissed me off. And it doesn't make any sense to me. I understand the idea of having to load and being limited by, you know, the spec of the machines that they're on. But it's just every time crowbar. Every time crowbar, 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 crowbar. It's ridiculous. I've never seen a man fix so many fucking problems with a crowbar. Whereas on Mirror's Edge, it was lifts. And it was valves, wasn't it? Spin a valve, turn, 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 turn. Whereas in this one, like, you burn your fucking toast to use as a crowbar. It's unbelievable. And that's all it is. And back in the day, before we were a bit more learned and a bit more observational on video games, because we've got a bedrock of experience in playing them, you didn't realise that they were masking loading or hiding some kind of transition. You just thought you were getting to the next part of the game and you're doing something cool to a door. There's only so many times you can repeatedly open a door in the exact same way before you notice that something's up. Ooh, we get to use our gun here too. You can stealth this room, but am I gonna? You see, I recorded 2 versions of this room. I recorded a version where I shot everyone and a version where I stealthed them. I think you're gonna see the stealth one.
This is crazy.
Just get out of here.
This reminds me of Spec Ops: The Line, which is a really good thing to remind me of, because that is a game that I absolutely adored the idea of it. That is kind of up there with Mirror's Edge, a game where its idea and its concept is so cool. I wish the gameplay was a bit better. But funnily enough, when I played Spec Ops: The Line on PC, a lot of the problems with the shooting are a lot better when you use a mouse and keyboard. So half of my issues with that game kind of went away. And a piece of trivia here that I've probably expressed before and forgot, so I'm repeating myself like the generic old man I am. I was going to cover Spec Ops: The Line on PC. I was going to do another foobar walkthrough. Kind of go through and dominate the game with advanced aim. And fixing the mouse aim on that game took me so long, it was absurd. I can't even begin to tell you. I had to hex edit all kinds of stats to get the aim to a usable value, and then I had to play on it long enough so that it felt okay. And I got to the point where I was pretty confident that my aim was going to be good enough to really shit on the game. I was doing some fun stuff. And then I beat the game on hard, and it didn't unlock foobar. And I couldn't edit the config to unlock it. I could have probably found a save, but when I was looking for saves, all the ones I found, they didn't seem like they were going to work when I tried them. So in the end, I ended up giving up on it. That was definitely something that was going to happen too. I don't really like to reboot walkthroughs and go back to old games, but every so often, if I can add to them in some way and do them differently, then I'll totally try. Especially if there's a PC unique difficulty. A lot of games go to PC and get ported late, and they'll add a difficulty, which I think is a really cool idea. It's just, when they get ported to PC, if it's before like fucking 2018, they probably have so many issues that they're not worth fixing. So it makes playing them a pain in the arse, and you really have to push yourself. And that's something that you don't really see on console, and that's one of the great luxuries of console. I had a message from a friend who said, why don't you just come back to console if PCs have so many problems, you know, consoles just work. And I found that message to be really, really funny, because consoles nowadays are just as bad as PCs when it comes to problems. There's so many things you've got to do now to play a game, it's kind of sad. It's not the same as it once was, where you put a cartridge in and pushed a button and within 15 seconds you were playing. Depending on the load times, I should say. Games aren't like that on console anymore. Games are just like they are on PC. You got to do a bunch of installs, you got to do a bunch of bollocks. You know, it's just the way of the industry. This mission's called Gauntlet, and I'm going to try to smack this guy so I can get his stun gun, and then I'm going to tase his buddy. If you get tased here, it's a one-shot. It puts you down, and there's nothing you can do. There's an achievement for doing this sequence without being spotted, and you totally can try and do that, but because I'd played the whole game in stealth, when you could have shot, I decided to play the area that you will probably stealth, shooting. And it makes it kind of dumb, because you're exploiting really bad AI and tasing it and reloading and just running around. It's an interesting change of pace, and I do appreciate it, but it's not the strongest part of the gameplay, it must be said. But the idea of coming back to console because it just works, to me, is really silly. And it's silly because I've been exposed to gaming at a completely different level. When you play a game, guys, when you have all your settings correct, and you have everything calibrated around how you like it to your preference, and you have your mods applied if they're available, and you've got something that you really like that's very specific to you, and you're doing so on a good setup, and everything's working as it should, you can't go back to console. You just can't. You can go back for novelty, you know, if Nintendo do something interesting, or if there's an exclusive that you can't touch anywhere else and you don't mind going back, but for the most, you just can't. It's one of those things, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle for me. And I can't explain that to my friend because he just doesn't understand, And I don't want to hurt his feelings making him sound like he's some dumbass or some cretin for being a console guy, because in reality, consoles are really good for what they do to the people that use them. But for me, they're not essential anymore. They don't do anything that holds my attention. They don't demand to be owned anymore. Whereas I think up to the 360 they did. They were doing so many cool things and so many interesting things that I wanted and I needed. And they've lost that favour with me. So now, I'm not interested. I can do without. I don't take any pleasure in saying that because I want them to be essential. I want them to be must-own devices. But gaming is not there for me. And I don't think it'll be there for a while. But I look forward to seeing what they do that eventually pulls me back in, because you know it'll happen. The market for console gaming is so much bigger than the alternatives that is the focus. And when you are the target demographic, you're the people that are going to get all the innovations, you're the people that are going to get all the emphasis. And that emphasis slowly drip feeds towards PC. And PC will improve as well, they'll both push each other to an extent, and hopefully we'll all get really, really good experiences together on whatever platform we choose, and it'll all get simpler and easier and more accessible. But as it stands, because consoles definitely took gaming into the living room and kept it there, a lot of the ports to PC are nowhere near where they should be, and it leads to videos like this, where I say this game's a cool game, you'll probably have a good time with it, but if you play it on PC, you're gonna have to pull some teeth. And even then, you're not going to be happy with the results unless you play PC at a very entry level. And that's not meant to make anybody feel bad, because there's nothing wrong with that. If you've got a really cool PC, you bought a nice pre-build and you just install the games, jump in and have a good time, that's awesome. I don't do that. I spend longer finding my sensitivity and putting it in to make my mouse feel good than you probably do in any options in any of the PC games you play combined. And it's just because different strokes for different folks, you know? And that's the joy of PC. It's as complicated and as complex as you want to make it. And if you don't want to, you don't do it. But here's the part where preference and personality bias end. Regardless of how you feel, PCs, ports, are nowhere near as good as they should be. And PC players are getting shafted because they're not doing what they should be doing, and it's really frustrating. And I'm hoping that it continues to improve, because PC ports have been improving. They improve every year. They get really good, and then every so often you get a stinker. Especially Japan. Japan are so behind the times on PC ports, it's enough to make you want to cry. But they're still making progress. If you look at things like Ease, the Ease ports, they are amazing for Japanese ports. Really, really, really cool. But here we go. This level's really nice. This level reminds me of Max Payne 2. There's a sequence in Max Payne 2 where you're escorting Vinny and he's in a mascot suit. And you go through a bunch of streets and there's a bunch of cars. And for some reason it reminds me of that. We're breaking into this dealership so that we can check its PC for some information. And then once it inevitably kicks off, we're going to get into a gunfight against a bunch of armed hostiles that will attack us in a van. In multiple vans. Vehicles will pull up. It's time to do some shooting. I kind of wish this sequence was longer. This sequence was really cool. Especially if you get them before they get out of the cars. I made the mistake, though, of putting on this AK without an optic, because I wanted to see what the iron sight was like. And this gun is good. This gun is really good. It's like a 74U. However, I'm not the biggest fan of how its irons look and how they kind of confuse your vision. What I did just then too, for the people paying attention, if you go into the evidence on the screen where it says press tab to view evidence, and then you come out of that screen, it will enable you to use your scanner again quicker than it would if you wait for that to remove itself from the screen. That pop-up lasts a decent amount of time, so if you're getting annoyed at waiting, tab into evidence, come out of evidence, and you can immediately go back to scanning. But once you put the key into the PC, it's going to start kicking off. I'm curious too if on this sequence I have the heavy barrel and the stubby on this. I do have the stubby, which means I probably have the heavy barrel too. So as the cars turn up, scan them for the points and then murk the guys inside. And just wait for the next bunch. We've already got the evidence, we just have to wait for the transference. And if you think about it, there hasn't really been that many firefights, has there? There was the firefight in the hotel. There was the firefight in the weed factory. And then there's this one. There might have been one or two that I've missed, but if you put all the firefights back to back, you've got like 10 minutes of footage. And if you don't stealth, you can probably shoot a ton more, which we'll definitely be looking into when that fantasy mod happens in the parallel universe. Oh, here we go, next van. I love the stuff popping up on the screen though. You know the HUD features of the points? I wish there was more of it and more of an incentive and more of a score focus. I think that would have been... But then again, you shoot yourself in the foot, don't you? Because can you imagine if this game had awesome scoring? Then you'd have to suffer those fucking cutscenes and those horrible load times. So it would be a horrible, like bittersweet torture syndrome, wouldn't it? It would just be the worst thing in the world. Because you've got this game you want to play with this wonderful stuff in it, but you can't get to it because they're all the fucking talking. Which is probably what people feel like when they come to one of my walkthroughs when they wanted no commentary and they're like, oh my god, this guy! I just want to see the fucking game, dude, stop talking. It's frustrating, isn't it? I feel the same when I was playing this. Now we get the drive, we can grab it and move on. You'll also notice, especially if you've got good eyes and you watch YouTube at 60, those cutscenes on those interactions are not at 60 FPS. So the frame rate difference is jarring right there. And my videos are 60 on YouTube, so you'll be able to see it if you've got it enabled. Which I always find that really weird with animation. Admittedly, if you animate at 30, you have to do half the work. So maybe it's time restraints or laziness? I don't know. I don't know. Personally don't get it. Oh, here we go. We get to use the deagle a bit. Is this another firefight? Here we go. Scan him, shoot him. Time to go. That's just crazy that though, isn't it? The deagle takes that many. What's with that weird tail on the audio for the deagle? I love stuff like this though. Firefights in these kind of urban settings with cars and, you know, modern contrivances everywhere. That's my kind of game. But get to the car. The car's going to trigger a driving sequence. Is this the driving sequence where you can die?
Jesus Christ, that was nuts.
This might be the one where you die. I died like 3 times on one of these, but I can't tell if this is it. Stay tuned, we'll find out, right?
Are you fucking kidding me?
It might not be though, it seems kind of tame at the moment. But I'm so kind of mixed on these driving moments. They're a nice pacing mix-up, and they're a nice distraction. They look beautiful. Staring at these vistas, this concrete juxtaposed with the beautiful sky there, the vanilla sky and the bleeding horizon, all of that is great. And it's definitely a bit of a decompression depending on what you're doing. And of course, here we go, I hit that. That's good. Good driving, Chris. GG. I really like Mendoza's gloves. You know, his suit and his fingerless like assault gloves with the yellow stripe on his arm. I think the aesthetic of this guy's outfit is really cool. And this is another stealth section, and at the end of this I'm going to do some shooting, so I look forward to that. We're still using the deagle. We're actually using a G36 here. G36 with a Cobra sight on it, I think that is. And I'm going to stealth through this first area. The person we're looking for here is played by, is it Eugene Bird? And it's kind of topical for my household, because at the moment my girlfriend's going back through Bones, the TV show, about the forensic anthropologist, and one of her assistants is the guy that you rescue in this, so it's really funny seeing him. And on the topic of that, the guy you play as, Nick Mendoza, he's played by the guy who's Melendez in the Good Doctor TV show. And one of the things I think's really interesting, that you might have noticed as well, is his accent in this game sounds nothing like how he sounds in the Good Doctor. And I just assumed that was how he sounds, you know when people sound a certain way? It's one of those things, is it? Harvey Keitel isn't pretending to be Scottish in all of his roles, is he? He's got a sound Harvey Keitel, and he might deviate from it for a certain role, but fundamentally, when you hire Harvey, you get Harvey. You get a certain way of speaking, a certain delivery, a certain presence. So I just found it so interesting that I thought he looked like Melendez, but I didn't think he sounded like him, so I wondered if they'd got the rights for his image, but he'd not done the acting or the voicing. And then when I went on IMDb, it was just him. So I don't know if they ended up dubbing him, or if he's just doing a different accent. Either way, GG man, he did a really good job. He fooled me, and I've got a pretty good ear for that stuff. Oh, this guy's coming as well. The interesting thing on this You can hide in foliage in this game, and it seems to be actually pretty good. But a lot of the times when you try and arrest people, it can interfere with the freeze mechanic. And I don't think it does on this particular sequence. So just then, it was okay, but I was behind a bush on one of the later levels, and I tried it, and my guy wasn't doing it. So just be alert that you might get some interference with that. Oh, I love it when you get the warrant arrest and it flashes that emblem on the screen. That's what Halo got really good. They just understood that in Halo 3, when they had those medals and that scoring system for arcade mode, when you were headshotting grunts and that stuff was popping up with those medals, I got such a Turok Rage Wars hard-on that it was so clever, and the dopamine was just dripping and I needed it and I wanted it more. That's the type of stuff that video games, when they were figuring it out, they didn't quite get onto it as quick as they could have, but certain people did.
Okay, I'm cool.
And nowadays you play games, don't you, and a million things fly up on the screen, and on multiplayer it's even worse. You do one thing in a multiplayer, you unlock 50 attachments, 50 pop-ups, and 50 different riffs to tell you of all the things you've just unlocked. And the whole thing is just a massive dopamine thunderstorm in your brain. And the only problem is now we're so used to it that we don't get the same response, so we just kind of blow hot and cold on it depending on if you actually care or not. But here we go, the cutscene that introduces the squint of choice. You're not going to see him though, because I edited that cutscene in a really stupid way, which I thought was funny. But now we get to go inside the salvage yard. We get to move forward. I love first-person shooter stuff. You know, just the perspective on the guns, the hands, the animations, that type of stuff is getting so good now. It's one of those things where I completely understand where microtransactions become so popular and people get so obsessed with that shit, because this guy's arms, fingerless assault gloves, and then this awesome, like, reverse Game of Death Bruce Lee jacket. I'm digging it, dude. I'm digging it so hard. This is up there with Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge, where I bought that version of the game for an outfit, because I thought Ryu looked cool as shit, even though I didn't like the game. That just goes to show, doesn't it, how powerful visuals can be. We're such visual creatures at times. A couple of guys marked here. There's a contract for us to grab. I'm surprised I haven't took the Deagle off. This has been a few opportunities to do so, and I'm still rocking it. Deagle's good, but it's not great. I was quite disappointed with it. I thought it would hit hard, and having to two-shot people just feels lame. Of course, it's probably a one-shot kill on the head, but I would imagine most guns should be. There you go, sir. Kiss the concrete. I was kind of tempted, too, to do like a half and half with this playthrough, because technically Mendoza's character is a cop, and then he goes to prison, and then when he comes out he's kind of pissed off and he's not quite the cop he was. So I was tempted for the first part of the guide to be supercop, and then the latter part to be just completely ruthless Punisher revenge mission. And I think that could have been interesting, but I got so into the points. I got sad when I wasn't getting those pop-ups, you know. My dopamine needed a tickle, even though it really didn't do much for me, but I do like points.
Okay, I'm cool.
And I'm hoping that YouTube doesn't pick up on some of these songs, because this game has a lot of stuff in it that's from popular culture. And the last thing I want is fucking demonetization or muting, because it's so rampant now. It's kind of bullshit. That was one of my fears with Mirror's Edge too. Mirror's Edge Still Alive is such a good song, it kind of just completely personifies that game. And the music in it's so fantastic that I needed it to be in the walkthrough, and what a greater way to do it than on the patron thank yous that I put in that video. And it didn't have any issues, no conflicts on YouTube, so I was super happy. And we'll see if this one does. Because earlier on, I've put some Battlefield 3 music on. And you might be thinking, Chris, why did you do that? Why Battlefield 3 music instead of Hardline? Well, I listened to the Hardline soundtrack, and I couldn't get anything that resonated with me personally to a level of, I want to put this on that thing that I edited at the beginning and say thank you to the people that support me. So instead I use something else that really does resonate, because I think that particular piece of music from Battlefield 3 is exceptional. It's up there with Theme for Kiel. But I'm scared that because it is from Battlefield that I might have problems, because a bit of trivia here for people that haven't been with me too long. When I originally did walkthroughs for Battlefield 3 and 4 when they first came out 10 years ago, I got copyrighted to death by EA. I didn't make a single dime on any of those videos, and it's unfortunate, but it's the business, you know. It's how it works. But here we go. It all explodes. We get to shoot. G36, 36 bullets. Terrible aim, but we'll get there. Two more guys to the right. I have to reload. There's the Deagle. Boom. See you later. I've just realised how weird and tinny the end of that gun sounds. And now there's a couple extra guys here as well. You can do some stealth here if you want to, but once I started shooting, I wanted to take the opportunity to continue. I actually quite like this triangle red dot too. I just don't like the frame on this particular sight. This kind of rubber cobra aperture thing that it's got going on. I find it too restrictive. I would really like to have the delta sight that the pistols have stretched and scaled to be a bit bigger with this triangle. I think that would be really nice. But I couldn't figure out how to do that, so instead I just got on with it. You know, in Phantom Forces, a Roblox shooter that's inspired by Battlefield has better optics than Battlefield, you know the fucking world is in a strange place right now. Ooh, this is it, I think. Yeah, this is it, guys. You can die on this sequence. You notice how these guys are shooting at you? I would imagine on Hardline, this is the hardest part of the game. Because on Veteran, this was the hardest part of the game. And you wouldn't expect it, but think back to Call of Duty, think back to, you know, Ghost Recon. The on-rail shooting segments of those games were incredibly difficult at times because you could get killed before you had any chance to fight back, and there was nowhere to hide. This is something gaming has lost, and I don't miss it. Some of the bullshit balance of old school difficulty, where they never tested it and you're just getting absolutely demolished by variables super cranked to a point where they should have never been. And then every so often you get a game that understands that and actually tones it down a bit. Like, wasn't it, speaking of 2015, I think it's 2015, Black Ops 3 on Realistic, the on-rail sequences didn't instantly murder you, did they? They were novelties, because they understood, the developers, and they played their fucking game and tested it, that dying in one bullet only feels fair when you have the opportunity to duck. When you can't duck, it's not cool. And they went in there and they adjusted it, and that right there, ladies and gentlemen, that's the kind of difficulty you want. Those are the kind of people and the kind of decision-making leads that we need. I think there should have been more of this too. More opportunities to shoot in the driving. I'm not saying go completely wheelman and just have me jumping out the car and stuff, but it would have been really nice if there were just moments every so often where it forced you to do some shooting, like when you were holding the wound on that girl's arm and shooting at the people coming in the house. Because this sequence here is dumb as fuck and I love it. You have unlimited ammunition and you never reload. So you can shoot infinitely right now, and you're essentially just... This is Kovacs. Kovacs with an incredibly shaky, weird screen and odd sensitivity. And on the timeline, this was so loud because I never really shoot in the walkthrough that this stood out by a mile. And it's kind of weird too, because you can shoot at the driver all you want, but you don't seem to get any credit for it. And you can shoot at the tyres, you can shoot at the car. This is all so scripted that they just want you getting rid of the side guy, the sidecar man, the pilot. And that guy's just walking around. Did you see that? What the fuck was he doing? There's a dude just patrolling. I wonder if that's an oddity of high frame rate. What was that guy doing? He's literally casually patrolling to the right there while we're driving around in cars, and I'm almost certain I just killed him. But he's doing what he's doing, you know, he's doing his job. The guy's just ice in his veins, doesn't care. And then there's just one more sequence now as we go into the train section. So there's going to be a dude to the left, you can see him on the map, and it wants you to kill him before a certain time. And you can't kill him as quick as you'd like, and that hit marker there, pretty interesting. That's the hit marker for hitting armor in Battlefield. So you can see that when you attack tanks in Battlefield 5. In this game, though, I'm assuming it just means the vehicle, right? Just means the car. So I'm shooting the fucking pilot, the driver, in the brain, and he's just shrugging it off with his Ray-Bans. And then that leads us succinctly to me swapping weapons. We're now carrying a... This is a P90 with a heavy barrel, a reflex, and we're rocking the revolver. And this is one of the bigger stealth sequences in the game. This one's kind of cool because you can make a mistake, and the mistake can prove to be really fortuitous. Because if you get their attention and they start patrolling, you can get them to just offer themselves up to the slaughter like lemmings, and they don't react. They don't react to the pile of 9 guys that you've just daisy-chained together on the floor, so you just kind of go around and cause chaos. And I was doing this really, really well, and I got inside to the last 2 guys, and I ended up getting into a gunfight, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to stealth it. And then when I restarted and I was back on that hill, it had took me like 7 minutes to arrest everybody and find a cool pattern. And doing 7 minutes of tedious takedowns all over again is... It takes an interesting individual to look at that and go, yes, sign me up to do this again. And I really don't know if that's my fault or if that's the game's fault. Like, have I done this too much? Or does it get boring quick? I suppose you guys have to be the decider. You'll have to tell me, guys. Did you play this? Did you do the stealth like I'm doing and take people down? Did you get to the point where when you'd made a mistake, it just got so mind-numbingly tedious that you kind of wanted to just shoot everybody because your patience was running out? Or is that just me and the fact that I'm not engaged? I don't know. And once again, I want to make this abundantly clear. Me not being engaged does not mean that this is not a good game and not a fun game. I actually recommend this game, especially nowadays when, like, the last game I could recommend to you would be Ease 9, and I love that game, but nobody played that game. But we're in such a drought for the things that I like that this game was a really, really nice distraction to come back to. But you can go in there if you want to. That door says that you can, but there's a guy coming towards it, and I'm going to daisy chain him and then kill everybody around him if I can, because it's just how we roll. And speaking of rolling, the way this game escalates in its difficulty is so weird. It's such an odd game to kind of scrutinize. Because if you do what we're doing here, you're going to have no problems. But if you start shooting, the game shows its fangs. And it shows its fangs in such an odd way. The final mission of the game involves going on an island that is completely armed to the teeth. It is a sequence of 3 or 4 encounters with like 10 to 20 opponents, and it's in an island tropical paradise, so it's really sunny, and it's Michael Bay o'clock, and the whole thing is just like palm fronds and leaves and bushes, and it's hard to see. And of course the AI can see you perfectly because they're AI and they're cranked, they're super cranked. And you can't, so all the cover and all the distractions in the environment aid them and hinder you, so it makes it kind of frustrating to fight. And then when you start fighting, you realise you're fighting against people that can kill you in a second. 20 people that can kill you in a second, and if they focus fire you, you'll die really quickly. So what it leads to, instead of it being a nice or a cool firefight where you're reacting and you're moving around intelligently and taking people out, it turns into you find an area, preferably high ground or a room with one entrance, and you camp that and head glitch or peek and then kill them as they all single file line up to come to you. And I can't imagine anything more tedious and more dull to watch. And it's kind of unfortunate that, because I didn't realise that that's how the game would be if you went violent in those stealth sections until I got to the final mission. And particularly the penthouse at the end of the game. There's a penthouse where I was on the 3rd floor, and it was just, there was about 9 guys that were sneaking up a helical staircase, or like a curved staircase I should say. And all I did was sit at the top of it, and as soon as I saw their forehead I shot them. I killed like 9 dudes. As one guy flanked me, and the one guy killed me, which was pretty good because he was sneaky and he had a shotgun, and I never heard him. But just the idea of the shootouts turning into that was kind of a big put-off of going violent as well. But who knows, maybe that was just a bad example and that level's just notorious for that. Maybe this one, if you start killing people, it enables you to have a bit more of a dynamic firefight. Because you know when they call first-person shooters shooting galleries, where it's generally some kind of whack-a-mole scenario, some point-blank, some time crisis where the opponents are behind some sizable object that they pop up and shoot at you, and then they go back in cover and they wait, or maybe they throw a grenade, and there's a bunch of them split around a room at certain distances to make it quite interesting. Like, when people use that term as a negative, I always kind of find that a bit funny. Because in a first-person shooter, isn't the whole point of it to shoot things? Isn't a shooting gallery what you're signing up for? Isn't a shooting gallery, when done correctly and when done with finesse, exactly what you want? An opportunity to flex your aim and shoot? Because it seems to be wielded and used as a very negative. It's a negative stigma of shooters, kind of asserting that all you do is sit on this roller coaster and get shown these thrills and spills, but you're never in danger and you're never engaged. And I just don't think that that's true. Except for, you know, maybe doing the stealth in this one. So I find it interesting with this idea that a shooting gallery is a bad thing. And it can be, there's no two words about it, but I think that the difficulty there and the real victim is the idea of it being a shooting gallery. A shooting gallery is fine if you do it right. If your pacing is bad, if the way you've scripted your game is bad, if your encounters are uninspired and there's nothing in between them and it's ad nauseum repeated and it doesn't have brevity and it doesn't have diversity, it doesn't matter how interesting the gameplay or how interesting you frame it, it's going to be shit. So a shooting gallery is only as good as its gallery, as its composition. And I think a lot of the times when people criticize this concept and use that term, that trope, I think what they're really saying is that you did not hide the magic trick good enough. I saw you move the coin between your fingers and drop it into your pocket, and your beautiful assistant, while present, wasn't evocative enough to hide that. So that's on you. Now here we go, breaking and entering the next episode. This is a cool one, this one. We're sneaking into a really rich guy's house and scanning some evidence, and we're going to be planting a bug in his meeting room. He's like a discount James Caan, the fella that we're spying on. And there's going to be an interesting edit coming up here, and I don't mean creative and fun like the stuff I've done before. I mean actually dog shit, and I wanted to be honest about it. So once you do the bug planting, there's a big stealth section getting out of the house. And I went through a doorway because somebody knew where I was, and I wanted to hide outside, and when I did it, it checkpointed. And I immediately realised, oh my god, I've gone to the next zone, I need to go back and get those guys. So I restart the checkpoint, and I'm still outside, so I completely screw it up. So up to this point, I have made it my mission and my goal as a supercop, Detective John Kimble.
What kind of an asshole lives in a place like this?
It has been my mission to arrest everybody, and if it goes wrong, I might shoot them. And I've adhered to that for the whole game. And then this level, I checkpointed myself on the other side of a door, and I didn't want to restart the level because of the aforementioned shitty loading screens and the shitty unskippable cutscenes and how long you spend not playing the game. So I continue on that sequence, I stealth all the way through the garden right up to the end, where there's a DJ and like a guy making a barbecue or something, and I go up to the guy on the right when he's at a really good distance from the guy on the left. I'm not looking at the left, and I go, freeze! And for some reason, the guy on the left hears me, and he gets alerted, and I have to do the whole thing over again, and I get really pissed off. And instead of doing it all over again, I drop down the side of the garden, and I go towards a door, and I skip it all. Usually, guys, in a walkthrough, I wouldn't tell you that, because it's meant to be seamless, it's meant to be a fun experience to watch. And what I would have done is I would have gone in, and at the very moment the two paths diverged, I would have edited it together to make it look like it's one seamless path, and I never did any of the stealthing. But because I'm a super cop and I want to show you what you're supposed to do for the purposes of doing it stealth, I'm going to show you the whole pattern all the way up to the last two guys that I fucked up on. And all you do, very simple, throw a distraction before you go for the guy. That's the thing I did wrong, and I lost 5 minutes of stealth, and I didn't want to do it again. And then once I get to that area, there'll be a crossfade, and then afterwards I'll show you the quick path if you just want to skip it. Because if you're playing on hardline difficulty, you're probably not caring about points, you're not caring about super cop, you don't like kindergarten cop because you're an infidel, and you just want to get to the end, so you just get straight there and get on with your business. And speaking of business, we're looking around this crazy opulent house looking for evidence. And I think most of the evidence I'm trying to look for right now is above us on an extra floor. Because there is one kind of issue and flaw with this piece of technology. It tells you the distance by meters, but it doesn't tell you the depth. And a lot of the times, if you get to the area where it should be and it's spinning around, it means it's above you or below you. And it took me a while playing the game to realise that that's what was going on. And this is one of those moments where, luckily, I cottoned on a little quicker. And the reason why it takes you a little while to realise that that's what's going on is because there's times when it's kind of difficult to find the evidence they mean. When they're hiding like fucking PDFs on bloody copying machines and stuff. Like, it's easy to overlook that. But here is the first sequence. So I come down the stairs, scan this guy, arrest him, scan his buddy. We're currently using the Tech 9, the wonderful gun of every bad guy in the late 80s and 90s. And there's a couple of people in this house that are playing video games and stuff and watching TVs and doing all kinds of cool stuff, so we're going to arrest the shit out of them. This segment reminds me of something from a movie, but I don't remember what movie it is. So here's a quiz for you earnest listeners who've made it this far. Is it? It's not a movie, is it? It's a video game. Oh, I'm ruining my own quiz. Anyway, I'm sorry. There is a movie or a video game, depending on which one it is, where you affix a tow cable to the struts on a big villa like this, a big mansion on the Beverly Hills, and then you drive a truck and you tear it down, and the whole thing slides down, doesn't it? The whole thing crumbles, like $1 million mansions crumble down into the Hollywood Hills or whatever it is. Miami Hills, I don't really know where we are. What is that from, guys? What does that make you think of? Is it a game? Is it a movie? I'll let you guys decide. Oh, this is cool as well, because when you drop down here, if you mantle over this, it triggers this sequence and these people start moving, which is kind of cool. Because I get myself into a bit of a spot here, a bit of a pickle, but fortunately, look how powerful this mechanic is. I walk up to two people about to spot me, tell them to freeze, and then I handcuff them both while all these other guards are wandering around this property. It's unbelievable. This might be the most powerful stealth mechanic I've ever used. But it puts me in a bad situation because these guys come in the house and then they see the bodies. Now, if there was a window to my right, I could hop through the window right now and I could go and say freeze to those two guys and arrest both of them, and that would have been a nice little bit of serendipitous pathing. But I don't know the geometry that well and I don't see a window to my right, so instead I'm going to wait, and this is where I end up going through the door. There's a vinyl over there that says Monster on it. Somebody needs to sue the Midnight immediately. But look at how many guards there is here. This is one of the areas in the game where there is kind of an interesting amount of guards. So this is one of the more difficult sequences to stealth, which frustrates me that I didn't fucking do it. So two guys go down there. You can see, like, look at the information it's giving you. It gives you way too much information. They could have got away with the stealth being so much more difficult, considering how much heads-up device manipulation they were going to do. I should not be able to watch where these guys are going. Like, when you alert somebody and they become, like, suspicious, I think their arrow and their vision cone should change. I think their vision code should disappear, and I think that their arrow should turn into a circle. And that way, you know they're there, you can still have an idea of what's going on, but you don't have the certainty because you've lost the advantage. I think that could have been really cool. Hell, I would have just turned the hood off, as I mentioned earlier, but this is it, don't do this. If you want to do a full stealth, don't do that. I just fucked it up right then. And that's that moment when you realise, bollocks, I can't go back. So, rip supercop. The mayor's going to have my ass. Anyhow, this is the stealth path. There's going to be two versions. This is not a difficult sequence to stealth, guys. I just got sloppy. It happens. And you'll also notice we're now expert level 15. We've been level 15 for a while. There's almost no reason at all to go for score now, other than the mechanic is so powerful, it trivializes most of the game. We've also got another piece of music here, so hopefully we don't get copyright striked. I was watching a bunch of videos the other day on YouTube. It was a channel of a guy who goes through the fall of YouTubers. And they were YouTubers I've not even heard of. I'm not exactly the most, articulate when it comes to knowing YouTubers. I know the classics. But these were people I'd never heard of, and he was going into these interesting stories, and for my sins I ended up watching these bloody videos while I was editing this. And I watched a bunch of them too, so he definitely baited that carrot on a string. And then I went for it. But it was about a mukbanger. There was this mukbanger, and he had a stupid name. It was like Jumbo Cardo Avocado or something. Something to do with avocados. And he was some guy, just some skinny looking dude, who got on camera and did the usual YouTube stuff and started doing mukbangs. He was a vegan too, which is interesting. A vegan doing mukbangs. Not really sure how that works. What do they do? Eat the container the food came in? Well, no, they can't do that, can they? Because it's touched real food. Anyhow, this guy starts doing mukbangs and starts out quite healthily and gets a big following because he's this skinny dude. And most of the people at that time doing those videos on YouTube were chicks. Korean chicks, potentially. So this guy blows up in the way that most people on YouTube do, and it leaves most of us thinking, what the fuck, there's no God. And then it jumps forward to this guy going from doing, you know, these healthier mukbangs and this vegan stuff to him just eating total garbage in immense quantities like they do in these mukbangs. And this guy put on 250 pounds or some shit. Like, this guy went from being just a normal skinny dude to a beast. 350 plus pounds from his YouTube videos. And the worst part about it is he actually believed, because he's delusional, that it was water weight, and he didn't know why he was putting weight on. And you know when you watch something like that, like you can see the footage of what they're eating. They're eating a ludicrous amount of food. They did like 10,000 calorie challenges. Do you have any idea what you have to do to fucking justify eating 10,000 calories? You know? You're not Michael Phelps. You can't do that. By the way, this was where I messed up, and this is the transition into the much quicker route, so apologies there, guys, but I wanted to keep it in just so I could show you. And if I had not been getting so burned out on the recording process and getting so bored of the game, I would have just re-recorded it and done it, but I was at that point where my patience was kind of going. I recorded this entire guide after I'd done a 2-hour commentary for Mirror's Edge, so I was just a bit... I'm not going to say I was tired, but I was feeling it, you know. I should have probably done it on a different day. In hindsight, that might not have been the best, but I wanted to get it out as quick as possible. I was inspired. So this is just me going to skip all this whole thing. But like, he honestly thought it was water weight when he started putting this weight on from eating all this garbage that he didn't need and not doing any kind of extreme exercise to justify the demand. And he just thought that his metabolism was going to save him, and for some people it might have done, you know, for a certain amount of time, but that's a bad foundation to build on. That's some sand if ever I saw it. So this guy's putting on more weight and more weight, but he's making tons of money, and he can't seem to distinguish between, you know, what he's doing is making him really fat and a problem for his health, but it's also the thing that's enabling him to live in these mansions and these penthouses, much like this house that we're looking in right now. And he made a video, right? He made a video talking about he loves looking out of his massive penthouse, panoramic vista, and he's got this... It's a really high penthouse looking out over the city, and it's just a sea of lights in the darkness. It's a beautiful view, a very expensive view. And he's laid on the bed, struggling to breathe, gasping for his next breath as he barely survives suffocating on himself. And he goes on to say, I enjoy/love watching the struggle of poor people. I love sitting in my tower watching poor people down below struggle in their daily lives, like he's some kind of fucking god observing ants. Like, really just not a good, healthy vision of your status and your life. And I just thought it was wonderfully ironic. This guy, who's essentially killing himself to be popular, is now looking down on others as he struggles to breathe. He struggles to simply exist because of what he's done to himself. And you know, when you're watching something like that, it's a darkness you can't even wrap your head around. And I don't wish any ill will on crazy YouTuber people, except for DSP. Fuck that guy. You know, I don't really care. These people have found a market. They've been industrious. They've got shit done. They've made a lot of money. More power to them. But everything you do in this life comes at a cost. And you've got to be willing to pay it. And I think that who he's turned into isn't worth any money. Because you can have all the money you want, guys. You can have the fanciest views and the biggest penthouses. But if you turn into a giant piece of shit to get it, was it really worth it? And I fell down a rabbit hole of these videos. On shit I didn't know, shit I did know, all kinds of stuff. Ooh, here we go, guys. This is episode 8. So this drive that you're about to watch, I did 7 times. And I didn't like it the first time. Luckily, though, I did get to listen to Alexandria Dario, who has a cameo in this game as this crazy cultist daughter chick who is rather Machiavellian and crazy, so that's cool. But this, I'll tell you the point when you have to change your frame rate if you're on PC. If you're on console, knock yourself out, you'll have a great time. But I watched a bunch of these different videos of these YouTubers. Some I'd never really heard of. There was I can't remember the names, guys, because they were so vapid and I consumed them so quickly and I have no interest in retaining them. There was a chick that decided to do her own TwitchCon and invited like 30,000 people when there was only room for 5,000 and cancelled it, and it was like the ultimate flop in history on streaming or whatever. So there was that thing that she did, which is kind of weird. There was a guy called like Falsey's channel or something. He was this guy that got into YouTube making videos. He was an actor and he ended up doing pranks and all kind of stuff, and he had like questionable mental health and he was going up and down and up and down and up and down, and his career was insane, just all over the place. And then there was a few other people, and it just, I'm a YouTuber, so I watch this with a slightly different view than some people might. I look at it from the perspective of, you know, when you were on top and you were making all that great money and everything you did was gold and everything you put out people watched, why didn't you fucking save that money or invest that money or do something proper with that money that would have enabled you to have some kind of security and some kind of safety? Why did they all buy mansions? Why did they all go fucking nuts? I just don't get that, right? Speaking of somebody who's been trying to make money playing video games for over 10 years now, I can't imagine the kind of brain that is making that kind of money that doesn't do good things with it. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. If I was on even a 50th of that money, I'd be fucking set for life. So I just don't understand how these people can squander it. Oh, by the way, we just missed that cutscene. The cutscene, when you pull up, as soon as that cutscene starts, listen to a little bit of it, change the frame rate to 3 FPS in the console. You can Google this if you need to find it, and then wait until the full cutscene happens, and then this can happen, and you'll be okay. If you don't do that, you'll get jacked by the door assassin, and he does it every single time. It's really frustrating. And then all we have to do now is get our gear back and stealth through this bunker. And most of this level is pretty easy. And then we go outside and we've got a big stealth sequence, so just keep on following what I'm doing here and I'll continue this weird tangent. But I just don't understand how these people can be so irresponsible with this vast amount of wealth that they made. To me it just seems really strange, and unless you're working an angle, or unless you've got some kind of mental health problems, or some kind of, neurosis and personality issues, I think everybody watching that, when you watch these videos and you see what they're making and you see what they're doing and you see how easy it comes, your first immediate response is, how the fuck did you burn through all that money doing what you were doing? Why didn't you just take a second to think maybe this wasn't going to last forever? Maybe foresight could have helped? And I suppose they're capricious, stupid young people, aren't they? And they never expected the well to run dry. They thought that they got the golden ratio on success and they were always going to win. And the reason they were so successful in the first place is because they were doing something different. So these people don't necessarily, they're not the greatest archetype of, somebody who's ready to face the world and face society and plays the long game. Most of these people are kids. They've never had responsibilities. They've never really had anything that they were about to get, and they got thrown immediately into this spotlight and they crumpled like most people do. Hard to say what you would have done in that position. You don't know, do you? Maybe you'd have turned into an arsehole. Maybe when you get rich off of doing something as cool as video games, you do turn into a pretentious, elitist, unbearable dickhead. Maybe that's par for the course. But there was one of them was really strange. It was these two people who were making vlogs about how amazing their life was, and they were being super positive, and they kept talking about fucking Jesus, dude. They were dangling Jesus like their viewers were a Rottweiler and he was a juicy steak. It was just unbearable. But they were coming across as this American dream, ultimate saccharine existence of nothing is ever negative, everything's optimistic, everything is chill, good, cool vibes. And they were like a pretty girl and a good-looking guy, and they had a baby, and they had like this big house. They were the picture of what everybody aspires to have. And then they started buying mansions again with the fucking mansions, man. They're obsessed. So they lived in a big house that they paid an exorbitant amount of money for, and then they bought a mansion. Even though they didn't buy a mansion, it turned out they were renting it because they were in massive debt and they were doing all kinds of weird shit. And then after that, they bought like a building site that had 2 mansions, and then they put the 2 mansions together, even though they'd not even bought the first one. And you're sitting there just thinking, These people are coming across like their life is perfect and they earn all this money, yet they're bleeding 17 grand a month on renting a fucking mansion they don't need while they go and buy another mansion, and then they're getting quizzed by people who are looking through this and saying, this looks like bullshit, what are you doing with your lives? This is fucking weird, what's going on? You're meant to be the perfect life and you seem like a bunch of scumbag con artists. And it turns out, this person goes up to him and says, we hear that you've foreclosed on your house. And like, no we haven't, people are being negative, you know, they don't believe in Jesus, Jesus this, everything's great, my life is brilliant, I'm wonderful, look at my tits or whatever. And then the next thing you know, they've found the public documents on the foreclosure, so they're just full of shit. And they just scammed and conned and like bought and rented mansions they didn't need for no reason other than so that they could make videos saying we're so blessed, guys, look how blessed we are. But it was all dog shit, it was all bullshit. They were just faking it until they could make it, apparently. And they seem like they'd made it. Why would you just not quit while you're ahead? Because I don't get that. I don't understand having that break, because it's never happened for me, you know? I thought I was going to... every single project I've ever put up, I thought was going to be a break. I thought this was going to be the one finally, you know? It was going to get some attention, it was going to enable me to reach a wider audience, and then it just never happened. And that's fine. But if it had happened, I think I would have at least fucking took a moment to go, wow, this is cool. This is a lot better than that other thing where, you know... you're struggling to get fucking 1,000 views on a video that took far too long to make and half the nuance in it no one sees, you know? You take a moment, don't you, to go, look at what we've done, look at what we've achieved. Look how cool this is. This is great. This is not going to last forever. We should really enjoy this. Enjoy it, see what we can do to extend it and make it as prosperous as possible. You know, this is cool. But they don't, do they? They take and take and take and take. I don't understand that mentality at all. But this is it, guys. Watch this. I'm going to put this guy down, watch the map, then I'm going to touch that box. Watch where he teleports to. Watch his triangle. See this? Boom. See him? And that guy saw him. See that? He's outside now. Guy saw him. And everyone's going to start moving around. And I'm really confused. I did nothing wrong. I did everything correct. DSP 2021. And then it's just, I'm incredulous here, because I know I've done this right, and it just checkpointed as well, so if I restart checkpoint, they're still alerted. So the game has just fucked me, basically. And I could do stealth and you know, divide and conquer and kill everybody. But instead, I'm going to shoot them all, because I got robbed, basically. But I do think it's interesting when you watch those videos, and I do think there's something worth mentioning. Those videos aren't necessarily the most objective pieces. They do their best to present a decent vision of what's going on, but you never really know the reasons why people do things, and you don't know every side of the story, so there could be some pretty juicy details left out. But it has to be said, for some of these people to have these falls from grace, it makes you wonder, doesn't it, what the factors were that led to them being unable to see what they had. And they talk a lot, don't they, about CEOs and these very successful, these really aggressive business tycoon guys that end up making an ungodly amount of money. And no money can be enough because they constantly want more. And they go on to say, don't they, ooh, we just did a side mission that gets us a new set of weapons, hopefully. But they say, don't they? They say that most of those people are probably psychopaths because they don't have that same measure of empathy that we have. So they can be aggressive in business. They don't take things personally. They don't have that emotional response to the fact that these are lives, these are other people's livelihoods, these are human beings. And that's why they're so successful, because they're able to look at it as a game and they're able to do anything they can to win. And you need people like that. You do. You don't need too many people like that, because then things get kind of scary and everything changes in the way that it's ruled and how we see the world. But there are always going to be those people, and they're always going to prosper in that moment. But even those guys that actually have something clinically different about their brains, even those guys can see that, you know, maybe we're in a good position here. We shouldn't squander it and, you know, start scamming our fans 5 years later. And it makes you wonder what is going on there. What is the driving factor? And it has to be delusion, one would think. It has to be some kind of underlying issue or some form of delusion. Because that guy did a video on Boogie, and I think we've all seen the Boogie scenario. Boogie's kind of an interesting case, because he's one of those people that when Boogie tries, he can come across as quite a nice person, and unfortunately for him, his dark and manipulative interior is bleeding out into his fake facade bravado of I'm a nice human being, and that's one of those things, isn't it? Sometimes you can't hide who you are for the amount of time you need to have a nice fulfilled career. So the more of his poison he let out, the worse it was for him, and you know, that's its own train wreck unto itself. But when you have people, you know the silly ones, the mild ones, there's some strange ones, isn't there? Like the Susie Lou's copywriting her own face and watching fucking animes on YouTube and reacting to them with the anime in the video and expecting that she should be okay to get paid for that. Like, that's just fucking insanity. And she actually said something to me on Twitter once, because I took the piss out of one of her thumbnails, so she view-shamed me. That was a funny day. I ended up having a decent conversation afterwards, and I actually felt kind of bad for her, even though she just, talked mad shit about me and threw her view count in my face. Which I think is always an insecure move, isn't it? But we all do it. But in my opinion, in those moments, like, you can throw the view counts in people's face all you want. You know, when every single one of your comments is talking about your face, or your tits, or how many dudes want to fuck you, I win. Because there ain't anybody in here who tells me they want to fuck me. and that is... That's prosperity, right, on a walkthrough or on footage of gameplay, because people are talking about the game or the commentary. They're not talking about my delightful button nose and delectable chin. But it must be said, all jokes aside, it must be frustrating for girls on YouTube when they're trying to play video games and engage with an audience, and the audience is just being like, I want to come on your face! Like, yeah, we get it, guys, we get it. You've got hormones inside you, and you're 10 years old, and you've never kissed a girl, and you probably never will, and you're definitely winning the award for, prospective school shooter of the year. But can you kind of calm down? There's a human being here trying to do something cool, and we're coming together over this shared love of video games. It doesn't always have to come from your balls, dude. You'll learn one day, or maybe you won't, and then you'll get suicide by copped. Who knows? But I do think that there are people on YouTube that aren't quite as egregious as some of the other ones, and those channels kind of, they paint them all with the same brush, don't they? This idea of, look at this train wreck, look at that train wreck, feel superior to this train wreck. This sequence is really fun, by the way. Ooh, we've got another capture issue. Luckily, I'm just laid down. I'm not laid down now, I'm actually shooting, but that's unfortunate. Isn't that bullshit? This is one of the reasons why I have a huge contempt for Providence. All the footage I've recorded for this game of me watching cutscenes that were never going to make the video, and the moment we get into a gunfight, I have a capture issue that ruins the footage. Like, you couldn't write that, could you? And if you think about it, obviously, the cutscenes are videos that the machine's playing. That's not very intensive. The gunfights, there's physics, there's all kinds of stuff going on, there's scripting. That's when the game is actually being stressed. So it makes sense that it might affect the capture a little bit there with some of the encoding issues. But it's just... Was it really so hard to give me a victory there? Couldn't it have been on the attempt where I didn't succeed that you had that section happening? That wouldn't have helped because I didn't lose many encounters in this game outside of restarting myself, because the game, even on the hardline difficulty, from what I saw, it's just not... It's not punishing enough until you get that particular Mortal Kombat AI difficulty where they whoop your ass and there's nothing you can do. But here we are, we're in a tank. Now we're playing Battlefield. This is kind of an interesting sequence. I'm not the biggest fan of the static filter they keep putting up to give the idea of this technology. But this is fun. And we're going to be taking on a vehicle as well. We'll be taking on another tank in a really strange boss fight. And I don't really get the boss fight. I appreciate that the vehicles in Battlefield are quite complicated, and depending on where you shoot them depends on your damage. And a skillful pilot or a skillful driver can manipulate these factors and do a very good job of anti-vehicling. I am none of those things. I don't use vehicles in Battlefield. It's not my gig. So I just tried to shoot it in its arse, because I think the arse is a weak spot. And then I shot it in the treads, and then I shot it in the front. I pretty much shot it everywhere. If it was an episode of CSI, I would have been cuffed in about 30 seconds. I never stood a chance. But here, it just so happens to be, tank rounds against another tank, so it's a little bit more balanced. But come in here, pick up the Duke, and then it's going to transition into the tank battle. There goes the roof coming in as we get the introduction, and I'm going to be leaving. And we're coming up on the end of the game here. It's kind of the last 30 minutes of it. And some of the conflicts they extend a little bit more. As we're rocking now with the K-10, which is just a Chris Vector, I think. We're also using, is it the Kimber 1911 or a 1911 derivative? I don't know which one it is. But here we go, tank action. And I never thought I'd miss a tank sequence in a first-person shooter campaign, but it's been long enough where I was roaring to go with this one. I would have preferred it if it had been in an unconventional setting, but it was fine. And doing that just there feels really nice. Especially when you get the points popping up, that feels sick. But here's the big bad. This is Alexandria Daddario's dad in the video game. And I'm just going to keep shooting him as he does whatever he does. I chase him as he goes into this hangar over here, and I end up getting stuck in the tank, and it gets a bit awkward coming up. I don't recommend following him into this hangar, it just doesn't work. I thought he was going to die. The only reason I chased him like this is I thought at this range, with this many shots, I thought I'd just annihilate him. And it didn't work that way at all. And then I was having problems now turning it. Not exactly the most adept at moving tanks. Here we go, I turned it around, there you go. Put one in his back. And that's it, I think. Yeah, he just died. So once he's dead, you can kill the chopper. And then you have to escape in a plane, which is to our left right now. And then the plane is going to take us to the next level, which I think is Episode 9, Independence Day. Which is going into a skyscraper and setting off a bomb, and then proceeding to zip line outside of it. Here we go, there's the plane. Easy does it.
After we join up with Kai and Tyson, we are going straight to Miami. What the fuck is that hissing?
But first, we have an explosion and a sequence. This is the sequence where Stoddard turns up for a frame. See if you can see this. See him? Did you see him? You can slow the video down if you want to, guys. I was tempted to do it. I was going to stop it there, slow it down, and put the X-Files music on. I'm not really sure why it happened, but I guess we can chalk it up to high frame rate, maybe. Something of the nature. But moving swiftly on, coming towards this building now, taking down and arresting these security boys. Pretty big stealth sequence coming up here. And then after that, there's a pretty big defense moment with some firefights. And this is our next opportunity to pick up an M16. Which is kind of frustrating considering I picked it up in that mission and got robbed. But again, guys, if you want to get maximum points, you want to get your warrants and tag your soldiers and then arrest them. And that's what we're going to be doing when we come into preferred outcomes in here. Got some laser sights on the guns now. Back of this gun looks really good with the gloss. You can see the light reflecting on it. Pretty beastly. But I'm going to go around the back. A couple of guys just over here having a conversation. We can get the double arrest. Scan them into double arrest, and then we can move inside. I really think it's interesting, though, the expert stuff. And when I came into the game, I anticipated that it was going to be so much more developed than it was. And I wonder what their original intent with that was. Maybe it was meant to be a bit more in-depth and a bit more advanced, because it could have really gone into some interesting places. I like the idea of score attacking levels and getting rewarded for it. Because some of the guns and some of the equipment and the attachments and things, they could have been really valuable. Some of them probably are, and I've just not used them. But the idea of being able to play better and being rewarded by having better equipment, that's just video game 101. That's such a good feature to have. Oh, here we go. Put him through the graphics. See you later, friend. You can interact with these cameras if you want to, but you don't have to. And you can scan it as well, and you will get points. So something to bear in mind. But the next sequence coming up is quite a long sequence. And just then, if you're wondering what that pause was, I'm trying to press a button to get out of the camera, but I think this is a timed sequence. So be careful what you wish for. You will get to see through the scanners, but you'll be locked into it until you get the opportunity to say no. But this is the beginning sequence, so go to this guy, get him on the ground, One thing to point out here is I made a mistake at the end of this, because there was a guy on a balcony that was overlooking the triple arrest you can do near the glass wall, and it might be on the sequence after this. It's a very similar sequence, quite a lot of them there. Disable the alarm for the points and for the safety, but everything went perfect up until the pathing of a certain enemy completely changed. And because I'd only redone stealth a certain number of times on certain engagements in previous missions, I didn't have any experience with what happened to the AI or what happened to the general flow of a stealth segment when you do the same thing repeated. Because usually in most games there's generally two rules, isn't there? The first rule is the game will follow a linear, strict structure until some kind of deviation affects it. The second ruling is every time you press restart, shit just goes random. Oh, right here, I could have crouched under the staircase, guys, gone behind that piece of geometry and tried to arrest this dude through the wall, but I thought he'd seen me, so I wanted to shoot him. And right now, all I want to do is shoot him, but I can't, because I can only shoot him when he shoots at me. So just then, I shoot him, she shoots the other guy, and unfortunately, supercop doesn't quite come forward on his name, and we end up taking down a few people, but not to worry.
Security stations in the lobby.
At this point, I was so close to going just straight up, magnum force and getting rid of everybody. But figure out the code by scanning the fingerprint scanner bit. I say scanner, it's like an inputter, isn't it? The keypad. And then this is the fight that I meant. So do you see the first three guys I just scanned? I'm going to immediately now take out this first guy and then go back on myself. On my original path through this room, I took this guy out and I just cycled through the room following this direction and I got rid of everybody. When I went to do those final three guys, I didn't realise the guy behind me, who I'm going to get now, overlooks a glass wall, like a balcony here, this gallery, and he can just look over this mezzanine area and he ruins everything. And because I wanted to make up for shooting that guy in the previous video, I did adhere to Detective John Kimble standards and got that shit done. But the rest of this is pretty simple, except for the very final sequence, because there's one guy that was supposed to walk from the elevators towards where I am now, where this guy is here, and his pathing doesn't trigger at all, and he stays there for ages, and I contemplate messing around with some distractions, and then I finally use the distraction. And this was the first time in the entire recording where the AI did this. I've never seen the pathing change like this, so I don't know if I altered what the pathing was when I interacted with the balcony guy, or if it was just one of those things, but right now, I was really confused here. And you'll notice usually on these paths, I've got a place I'm going to, I'm moving to it, I'm doing my route, but here I didn't really have one because they were all bunched up, and I didn't really want to use the distractions too much, because I'm not the biggest fan of that in especially first person stuff that's this simple. Like if you're playing something like Hitman and you've got a really cool brick strategy, or throw something somewhere and something awesome happens, those kind of strategies are amazing because nobody does them. That's the stuff reserved for a playstyle and for a very particular type of brain. Whereas in this situation, you have a universal distract button that most people are going to use because it's really strong, and because of that, it makes me not want to use it. And here we go. Right now, they're moving a little bit. I don't know if it was proximity based. He didn't react to that distraction, that guy, I don't think. I don't even think he heard it, but never mind. We can go and deal with him anyway, because he moved towards this area, and I know that I've got pretty much immunity at this point, so I scan him and I take him down. I don't get the points because we've already scanned him on that previous attempt. We get the arrest, and then there's just that guy straight ahead. The guy moving now, who's coming down here. This is the person that was supposed to be on the path before, and for whatever reason he was delayed. I would imagine that if you do this room enough, you can understand exactly why that is, but replaying this game with the aforementioned issues I've already talked about is more power to you. I don't know how you do it, but once you get this guy, you can then finish those final dudes, and that's the end of the sequence. This is a cool level, this. It comes a bit late in the game. Oh, that was interesting. So I tried to get all three of them then, but the angle was bad. So instead, I had to take that guy down, and I took him down, and luckily my partner had the gun on these two guys, so I didn't have to worry too much about them resisting, and then we can finish off. And then we get to do another one of the crowbar doors. And another alarm for some bonus points. But that's one of the areas of video games I'd love to see a resurgence of. The idea of a score system and of points mattering. I love the idea of doing creative and unconventional things during a campaign on a game and mixing up the gameplay to demand the player to do something a bit more engaged and interesting than just merely interacting with the systems. I think that opens the doors for some really, really nice replayability. And one of the biggest problems with video games nowadays is if a game doesn't have a multiplayer component, people don't even look at it from the perspective of replay value. You know, you play it, you get your achievements, you might do a harder difficulty, collectibles, and then you move on. You know, you do have the speedrunners and the challenge runners and, you know, some of the more fringe and niche people that come along and spend a bit more time with the game and truly master it and really get in there and put in the time. But it's so, as I say, it's so niche, isn't it? Those people are quite rare, even though it's... You see a lot more of that now thanks to the internet and thanks to the popularity of marathons and such. But they're not the majority, you know, they are a gross minority. Most people don't beat the games they buy. They don't have the time, you know, they're kind of that social smoking equivalent of a video gamer.
I'll find something to open
Type
the
of
door.
person that likes to engage in the conversation at work when it fleetingly comes up, but they don't really know too much because they only kind of bought it so they could be part of that zeitgeist. Then there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to score systems, those people aren't going to be delving into them, are they? They're just going to see the fancy pop-ups, get the dopamine, and then move on. Whereas, you know, if you're a little bit more dedicated and you do like to perform and to improve and to apply yourself and to really get into the minutiae of a game, you've got a really nice system to mess with. And just seeing these points popping up, it makes me wish there was more. It truly does. It also makes me wish that the levels had a grade at the end for the points that you did get and a way that it calculates it. Because this right now, in most of my walkthroughs, I'd be horrified to see this. The idea of me looking for collectibles, because that's what they are in reality. Looking for collectibles when I'm guiding you through a game. 5 years ago, I would have never done this. Like, this would have been an affront on the quality of my productions. But, you know, some time passes. This is not a difficult game. Nobody's coming to this because they're really struggling with the gameplay. You're watching this because you're either a fan of the channel or you've clicked on it and this English guy said something that engaged you enough to make you want to listen to a bit more. And before you know it, you might have listened to far more than you thought. So I don't have to worry about people having trouble with a game that's not that difficult, that's quite old. So those guys aren't going to be pissed off when they click on this. And then you have the idea of it giving you points, which tickles the old school arcade player in me to want to chase those points. So it's one of those things, isn't it, of I get to do something slightly different in this project, and that enables me to think that I'm continuing to progress and evolve and adapt to a changing environment. So it's win-win. And this sequence here is really, really cool. You get multiple gunfights, and I get to actually shoot. And over here, there's the spawn point of this staircase where they come from. Right now, I'm looking for the spawn, and I find it right here. Because as soon as it tells me that, I know where they're coming from. And I wanted to hide on this door, and if they came past it, I could shoot them. But it turns out they spawn in that stairwell, so I'm just going to shoot them. And the glass to our left, I think, is bulletproof. So they can't even shoot me via that glass. So this is a kill box for me, and everybody else has to funnel around this opening. So all I'm going to do is exactly as you see right now. I'm just going to wait, and I'm going to shoot everybody that gets close enough. And there's nothing they can really do. It's a very unfair gunfight. And they all have torches as well. So that's pretty cool. And look at that, you can destroy the bamboo in this game. Imagine cutting bamboo in video games. And here you go, just aim at the lights, get rid of them. And just be very careful. You take damage very quick in this game, but you also regen pretty fast too. And if you have that health box, you regen even faster, I would imagine. But it's moments like this, using the M16, using this red dot, that makes me wish there was more shooting in the game. So that definitely inspires me to come back on Hardline and shoot the shit out of it. But pick up the phone, and now we have to get to the boat. And this next cutscene coming along, as you go towards the balcony here, where the platform is, you do some crazy stuff here. The cutscene's absolutely absurd. It's really fun, the standard one. I've trimmed it down again, as I have all of them, because it's a little bit lengthy. And then afterwards, we're going to be running on the streets in one of the best sequences in the game. It reminds me of Heat. Anything that reminds me of Heat is a great thing. I like this as well. You can tell these people to freeze, but I just kind of stared at them, and then it still pulls you away. These are the moments I wish this game had a couple more of, even though they are ridiculous. And then here is me using the vector finally, because I've put it on a few times and I've not really managed to use it. It has a very distinct racking mechanism on the audio, which is kind of cool. So whenever you chamber around, it makes an odd noise, and I like that. Tickles my reptile brain. A couple of people turning up in cars so you can just completely decimate them. This pistol is completely jacked out too. It's got all kinds of attachments on it, but I'm not that fond. I didn't find a pistol that I liked, but I did find it really funny that this game has more pistols in it in a single player than what Battlefield 2042 had in its multiplayer. That game has 3 pistols. You can choose from 3 pistols at the beginning of this game, and there's just more to come. So that's kind of another nail in the ornate coffin of that horrendous release. A couple more guys in this van, we'll take them out and then immediately go prone. Don't be afraid to engage, but at the same time be aware that if they decide to, they'll shit on you. That's ammo, that. Ooh, he had a shotgun. That could have been dangerous. And did you see the little map go green just then? That tells me that I've killed everybody in the vicinity and I can move on. But just this moment here, there could have been a lot more shooting in this game, and you know what? I wouldn't have minded. And that's a good thing, though. For the fact that the game makes me wish it had more shooting, it means that it had interesting pacing and a sense of brevity that we don't often see. So I do appreciate that. And now we have the final level of the game, which is episode 10. I think it's called Legacy. I'll have the chapters in the description if anybody's interested in jumping around. This level is really difficult. However, you can stealth the entire thing, and at this point, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning when I was recording this. I've been recording it all day. I'd gone through that wonderful, just absolutely majestic, game-breaking glitch that made me drive to that cutscene repeatedly to the point of suicide. And I was a little bummed. So when I stealthed the first section coming up, which was quite difficult, one of the more difficult sequences in the game, I thought, oh, I hope the next sequence is going to be combat. I hope it's going to be, you know, a big stealth segment, big combat segment, and then maybe an on-rails boat chase, maybe? Shooting at another boat, boat-on-boat action, Modern Warfare 2. And no, the pacing on this level is garbage. It is just a ridiculous amount of stealth sequences in a row. And if you start fighting them, it becomes incredibly tedious because they just shoot you through all the foliage. And it's frustrating in one perspective, because this is hard. There's not many hard sequences in this game, but look at the map right now. Look at how many people are on top of each other. To stealth this, you really have to divide and conquer and segregate, and there was a transition there as I ran down the side. This was the best way I found to do it. And I was really hoping that we were going to get some good pacing and some diversity, but instead 3 big stealths in a row. So I'm just going to skip the next 2. And you can do this whole level in 5 minutes. But I'll say right now, if you do the whole level stealth, and you take everybody down and you arrest them for the points, this is probably the most intensive mission in the game, because there's a lot of dudes, and it's very easy to make a mistake, and because there's so many people, the price of the mistake is much greater. And it's not greater in a sense of, oh, you know, you've got to do it again, it's difficult, you know, you're going to get your ass kicked, it was hard what you're doing. It's difficult from a sense of just psychology, you know, freezing and then doing the same animation repeatedly. It gets to a point of just sheer banality. And I wish I didn't have to say that, but I can't help but be honest, you know, and I want to be honest with people listening. If you've taken the time to listen to me ramble on this video, I want to take the time to be honest to you, because I think you deserve it. And you might love it, you know, you might play this game, you might be doing this and get super into it, cosplaying a police officer, you know, talking about your divorced wife and the kid that won't speak to you, and just really getting in there, and it could be really fun. But it was outstaying its welcome. And in hindsight, I could have probably stopped and then, you know, recorded the day after, and it would have been a nice rest, a night's sleep, just completely revitalise you and reinvigorate you. But I was under the impression I was going to release this the day after the Mirror's Edge one, and I was on a pretty strict schedule to do so, because I wanted to make sure I did it before 2022. But that was pretty stupid when I think about it. because I wanted the Mirror's Edge guide to do as well as it possibly could, because I was really proud of it. And if I'd have released this too close to it, it would have stunted the attention it got immediately. And my videos don't get a great amount of attention. I'm doing quite well at the moment with the Halo video. The Halo video did really well for me. And of course the 10-year anniversary was really nice too, to see people engaging with that. But Mirror's Edge and the fail video I put up, they both got about 1,000 views in the space of a day. And I know that's fucking appalling numbers. That's the kind of numbers that's just a joke and effortless to most YouTubers. But my channel at the moment, after, you know, the decline with how YouTube has changed and my diversion to focusing on streaming, that's good numbers for me. And it's hard numbers too. It's hard to get that kind of response immediately. That's kind of the channel that I am. My channel's rather eclectic and underground. And back in the good old days, when we were doing the Dark Souls PvP, I could throw a Dark Souls video up and get 1,000 views in like 3 hours, and it was awesome. And I could consistently get anywhere between 1,000 to like, you know, 10,000 views on those videos. But that was a long time ago, and the people that were sticking around for those videos, they weren't here to watch other games. And that's the true stigma of YouTube, isn't it? If you want to do diversity and variety, it comes with some claws. And a lot of people get trapped in video games because that's the one where they get engagement. And as much as it's frustrating to not get the appeal and to be able to expose your work to as many people as possible and to get that satisfaction of knowing that a decent chunk of people got to see it because YouTube favoured you in the algorithm, I think a worse fate is getting that accolade, but it being a chain around your neck, chaining you to something that you don't really want to do, you know, long term, and that becomes a prison of your own design because you're fated then to essentially grind one game into oblivion, and I just cannot do that. To me, that's not fun. That's turning what I love into a job, and everything you do feels like a job at some times, you know, no matter how good it is. I've said this many times to people to try and give them the other side of it, because people look at the idea of being paid to play video games as a dream job, right? You go out, you work your 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, if you're lucky, and then you come home and you choose to play video games in your spare time. So just imagine being paid for that. How can these people ever complain? How can these people ever say that, you know, they've got it hard and whatnot? And as much as I don't want to side with the wonderful fairies and solipsistic people of the internet trying to convince you that earning millions and then getting taxed into oblivion is really stressful, and I really do feel for Ninja. I lose a lot of sleep thinking about all the millions that Ninja loses out on because he has to do this thing called paying your fucking taxes.
Haven't given it much thought, Captain.
But there are days when what you love can feel like a chore, you know, especially if you don't want to be there. And that's my philosophy. My philosophy is anywhere you don't want to be can feel like work. And it can seem so strange to a lot of people because they can't put themselves in the shoes. They can't think of it like that because it's something that they, in their mind, would kill for, and they can't understand a mind that would complain. But do anything for long enough when you start to lose the luster for it, and it can feel like work pretty quick. And it's funny too, because even doing a commentary like this, talking at length like this can be hard. Especially when you don't have anything worth saying because the game's not really, you know, bouncing off you that well and there's nothing to divulge. And then you have to go out on a limb and do your own thing. And you know that when you do that, some people are going to be lost because they're not interested in it. They want you to talk about Battlefield. They want you to stay on topic, and they don't want some crazy Englishman rambling, so they'll just immediately leave. By the way, that transition there, if you go to the left, you can go on a little side tangent all the way around the side of that mountain, take down 2 guys, and there's a path up to a support structure that's near the penthouse. I went that way, and I was so bored by the time I'd finished going that way that I didn't want to do it. So I restarted checkpoint, and I came this way. And it just so happens that this way has a massive stealth sequence. And I stealthed the entire grounds here. I took down everybody, arrested everybody in the start of these grounds, and then I went into the penthouse. And in the penthouse, you can just snip out the back if you want, but I wanted to try and take some people down inside. And somebody saw a body on the first guy, and I immediately started a gunfight. And then when I had the gunfight, It was a siege of me shooting people, slowly walking up the stairs, which I mentioned earlier on in the guide. And it was the most boring 7 minutes of footage that I restarted the checkpoint and I stealthed this entire sequence to get to the end of it. And this will be the part that I think people will use if they're having trouble here, because this level, if you try to do it in other ways, can be very, very difficult because the checkpoints are brutal and the sequences are long. But if you just want to get to the end and get your achievement, then follow this, because I'll get you all the way through there without incident. But talking for a length of time when you don't really have any kind of direction is definitely a skill that you have to forge. And it can definitely feel like work at times, because you can feel uninspired and uninteresting, and you can feel like you're not doing a good job or you're not delivering what the guide deserves. But a lot of that is more a manifestation of your own self-doubts. I'm just grateful that anybody listens to these, because when I started doing YouTube 10 years ago, can you imagine that? One of my mantras and one of my personal styles was to not have awkward silences. I wanted it always to be engaging. And for some people, I've succeeded. For others, I am a glowing failure. I'll let you be the judge of where you think I sit there as we move towards the end here. All you have to do on this sequence, guys, is if you go to the right here into this building, there's one guy guarding the office of the final guy, and then it's just an interactive cutscene, and then there's going to be a thank you to the patrons at the end there. And due to YouTube's ad revenue being all over the place, especially as we move into January, the people on that list are the true unsung heroes of this channel. With their support, I can justify making these videos, because as much as I love doing it, the craft of it, the mastery, they do take a decent amount of time, and what you get back sometimes does not reflect that. But thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and you take care now.